The story begins in the dungeon Tyros. The deeper, the farther. It darkens with every step. The deeper they go, the more everything consumes. In the darkness, a battle fueled by despair is already raging, pulling inward into the abyss. Already very close. In the dungeon, several people encountered the Lord of the Restless, a demon lick. Dungeon, one of them believed that the undead are the strongest type. About the monster, he called his minions and the people shouted loudly. Let it endlessly call monsters one after another, so that they cannot see the end. But what can they do? They called the princess and she said, if they desire it, then let it be. You will overcome this and let their invasion continue. One of the team members thought about her black curly hair fluttering in rhythm. The wind pushes forward, she is still fighting with despair as if this is the last battle. Her name is Yuika. The Black Princess, Dungeon Digest, is a specialized class that helps carry the traveler's equipment and allows their guide to reach the path to ways of exploring and conquering the dungeon 20 days before this. 4 in the Tyros dungeon at the depth of the 20th floor. A team of people was fighting against huge golems loudly declared that they could not waste this chance in vain. While there is still time, they need to act together. He ran away, and what do tanks do? The mage attacked one of these monsters. He cast the spell Lightning Strike and destroyed the monster. Later, near the underground oasis, they stopped, took a pause and rested. And one of them loudly cursed what was happening. The mage drank a mana potion, and someone immediately asked how many exactly. How many of that potion has he already drunk? A waste of mana. He turned around. He returned to him and said that nothing could be done about it. This vanguard is useless. The swordsman got angry and loudly asked what he was saying. He raised his stick, smiled, and asked. He was asked if he forgot what had just happened, and they immediately picked up the quarrel again. They switched to new arguments when suddenly some guy drove up. Are you fighting again? As long as no one pulls them apart, it's still okay. Is that so? The tired team members said. Let him just try to separate them. He was too exhausted to get involved. The dude with the huge backpack on the side decided that there was nothing left to do. Dungeon Sherpa, Ro. Ro approached and said that the two of them needed to listen. Shouting like that is dangerous, the monsters could have heard. They returned to him and loudly declared that he could not possibly remember how he saw him during the fight. But where could that damn Sherpa have been? He said with a smile. Did he run off for some valuable herbs? The swordsman grumbled discontentedly. Isn't it cool to be a Sherpa? He doesn't have to get into fights with monsters, and it's an easy way to earn money. The mage with a bold smile cut in, as if saying it's a problem if they got hurt, so let him be quiet. The protagonist replied, if he runs out of potions, he can give you a few. He pulled out several elixirs and said that none of them were diluted with water, so they were all of high quality. Their words confused them and they decided, this is a healing elixir. He will heal your wounds. This restorative potion is the best choice to regain strength after fatigue. He even has a strength potion. The mage glanced with an almost invisible smile and said, but it's not free. Really? He handed them the price list. They twitched in surprise, looked at the numbers and sharply exhaled. Prices are twice the market rate. The swordsman grabbed him by the collar and thundered, are you mocking us, swindler? On the contrary, he instantly calmed them down, coldly asked them to pull themselves together and promised to inform them. For a dungeon, this is quite cheap. Even if they decide to return to the surface now, they won't be able to avoid clashes with monsters. If that happens, their equipment will be damaged and then they will have to pay even more. But if they buy it from him, they will save both time and money. One party member thought, just need to hold on until. And they even had enough endurance to get to the surface. The swordsman with a dissatisfied face loudly asked, is this already his victory or will they all perish? MC apologized and said the price cannot be negotiated. But you can't just buy this on the market, it's for high-level adventurers. The party members called the leader and declared, we need to buy this exactly as high-level adventurers. They let them use high-level items. He should stop behaving like a barbarian, it's not worth it. He finally fell silent, let him go, and said that this time he would let it slide, but he would never hire him again. Rose smiled and said he was grateful for their cooperation. Later, he thought about the city of Tyros, about this city. The city was built immediately after the dungeon was found. This is a city of adventure. He entered the Sherpa Guild and immediately noticed a woman was already sitting in the hall. She leaned over the counter and greeted him, and he in response called her an old witch and declared that he was already home. Home, she blossomed with a smile and asked how everything went with their unruly gang. He paused for a moment, running the thought through his head, and replied that they were all, as she said, seasoned travelers. They were indeed rebellious, that's why they were called that, but regarding strength, strangely they remained quite balanced. He thought they might stay there for a long time, but they firmly said they would no longer hire him. She looked at him slightly displeased and declared that he was already the third. It turned out that if he didn't manage, hiring others would be pointless. He continued and added that he would submit the report tomorrow. First, he needed to pick up his younger sister. Sister, she exclaimed and asked if he had left her again with the relatives. Everything was difficult for him. After that, he came to He turned onto another street, saw Mari, and called her by name. With a smile on her face, she rushed to him and hugged him tightly. Clinging to his leg, she exclaimed, "Welcome back," and shuddered as soon as the door opened. And that man from there called him and said that he finally returned. The protagonist Muro and said that he was grateful to her for always taking care of his sister. He gave her money and promised he would inform her as soon as her help was needed again. She slammed the door and declared that she didn't know whether she was ashamed or whatever feeling it was, but he didn't pay any attention to it at all. He patted her on the head and said it was time to go home. By the way, maybe they should pack lunch for the road. For lunch and off to a picnic in the forest, she took his hand and asked if they would be gathering gauzy fruits. He agreed and said it was simply harvest season. They could gather some and make. And they made a lot of jam. She laughed and joy shone on her face, and she said they hadn't been on a picnic for so long. He looked at creek 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 creek. He looked at her with a smile and thought, a Sherpa never fights monsters. But in a dungeon, can you really predict in advance what will happen? A dungeon is a risky business, where danger lurks around every corner. There is always a chance that he won't return. The little sister, she is only 4 years old, understands all this. They reached home and he promised there would be stew for dinner. She beamed with joy and said that he should give her permission to help. The next day he came to the Sherpa Guild, greeted in the morning, and reported that he had brought a dive report. He was blown away when he saw a man by the door who calmly stated he was waiting specifically for him. But this was his favorite. The outstanding student was already waiting for him. If allowed, he wanted to talk about the wonderful job he had just found. MC clicked the lock and closed the door right in his face, grumbling that when he smiles and talks like that, it usually means he wants to drag him into some complicated matter. He was trembling with nerves. He said that he had asked him for many things before, but this time differently. They have something important. An important person from the royal capital. He still opened the door and looked at him distrustfully. And the man added, this time the employer is a member of a famous group. The group arrived from the royal capital. In the hall, he loudly proclaimed that this is Twilight's sword. He looked at her in surprise and asked again, what is this? Isn't this the same thing that the guild rumors are about? After the positive answer, he thought, that's right, as everyone knows. They cleared many dungeons, the most famous being those mentioned in the adventurers group list published monthly. They are considered the toughest not by numbers but by real strength. They always hold the top spots. They are also called the heroes of the East. Rumors say their leader is a beautiful girl with black hair who is not yet 22 years old. As he understands, this will be their order. She introduced herself and declared that she wants to clear the dungeons of Tyros. Will he help her with this? He thought. Today it became known that this dungeon extends down 47 floors maximum. The last floor they could reach was 53. To clear the entire dungeon, they needed to reach and clear the last floor. Exactly. Everything happened because of the guild leader Gunjai and the former guild leader Jima. He demanded only one thing from him, to accompany the travelers. Dive into the deepest, still unexplored corners of the dungeon. This meeting marked the beginning of an amazing event. Adventure, but they still did not know what lure really hid. He sneaked even deeper all the way to the very bottom of the dungeon. Their true darkness awaited him. Leading the heroes squad into the farthest depths of the dungeon, that was the mission. That was a great honor for the dungeon. Sherpa Ro raised his hand, smiled, and thanked her for the offer, then admitted he was scared, so he had to refuse. Diving into the unknown parts of the dungeon, that would take a lot of time, wouldn't it? He can't disappear for so long. Jima laughed and said that maybe she could train his sister as a Sherpa while he was away. With an indignant expression, he loudly declared that he was not joking. She called him Little One and asked if he was going to take care of his sister right. That's why he eventually became a Sherpa, because it was a very profitable business in this city. He should be happy because this time the reward was even greater, one he could not have earned in a year. Now, it turns out he had no objections, right? He took the dive plan from her, read it, and thought, if he gets this reward, Mari will be able to go to school until they have to do a long dive until the moment they completely clear the dungeon. So they will only have 3 short-term dives left. That will be enough for him to agree to the offer. And he also said that he doesn't see any other groups on the list except theirs. Yuika said that Twilight's Sword is a group that operates independently, while for regular groups they had to gather to the unknown parts of the dungeon. Other groups were moving too slowly, so the risk was growing that monsters would set an ambush. However, Twilight Sword is a team of 4, and they had already cleared many dungeons very similar to this one. Twilight Sword is strong enough to simultaneously challenge several large leagues. That's how they always worked. Operated and how they plan to act next. The protagonist said he would familiarize himself briefly. Theorized himself with the dive plan. He introduced himself and continued. He extended his hand and said that he accepted their request. West extended her hand in response and said that then he can call her by name. He said he couldn't wait to work with her. West firmly shook his hand and with a friendly smile replied that Their mood was mutual. He was surprised that she smiled. He did not expect it. She said she would gladly leave right now. She needed to replenish her supplies of tools and potions. He asked if she could recommend a good shop. She agreed, but still wanted to go to a place where travelers like to hang out. And she added, they are well known in these circles. It is impossible to approach such places so much so that she cannot even breathe properly. Today she wants to avoid all of this. He said that popularity is pure constant pain. He thought that being a celebrity was not so simple at all. And he clarified, equipment preparation is a separate charge. She replied that it does not matter, she will just leave everything to him. After that they walked around the city and bought various necessary things. He said that finally they had gathered everything they needed. She thanked him. Moreover, he asked if she minded having dinner. Told that his younger sister would be there. Yuka did not object and agreed. Later they went into his house. Mari met them, introduced herself, and said that she was 4 years old. She was years old. She called him by name and asked if this was his dog. Although there had been almost 20 years of agreement before, he said that she was his sister. The only difference was that she could simply call her by name. She sat opposite, smiled kindly, introduced herself, and said that she would work together with her brother. He confirmed and added that they would dive together starting from that very moment. From tomorrow, after that, they reached the restaurant. The waiter brought them dishes and thanked them for waiting. Mari happily said that it would be tastier if eaten like this. She looked at her. He approached her, politely thanked her for the advice, and MC just glanced and thought that he hadn't seen her so sincere for a long time. When he decided to invite her to dinner at the restaurant, he didn't even guess that they would understand each other so easily and naturally. The waiter brought ale and Yoika asked if it was beer. He nodded and said that this drink goes perfectly with local food. To drink this, she hesitated for a moment. Even when I turned 16 and was allowed to drink, I never tasted alcohol. He entered the hall and he offered her juice. It had just been brought. She began. After drinking her juice, she said in a satisfied voice that she really liked this juice, and he was already about to say something in response. But she quickly tipped it to the bottom, raised her hand, and asked for a mug of ale. So she already started drinking alcohol then, and added that she was already 20 years old, so she could drink beer. He was surprised that she drank a whole mug in one gulp, but immediately. As soon as it happened, she immediately felt worse. In the morning, she opened her eyes in bed and froze. Could it really be morning already? Nothing was clear from here. It didn't look like her room. She felt her head flooding with pain, and remembered dinner with him and his younger sister. Eureka remembered yesterday how she drank a mug of ale. She hugged Marie and whispered that she was so sweet. She put Marie on her lap, started stroking her head and said as if Marie was an angel. Now she needed to call her sister again. She felt extremely uncomfortable about it. He grabbed her by the head and thought about what she had done. What kind of bitter drink is this? And this knocked all reason out of her. Mari was so sweet. So she tried to be a good sister. She heard their voices and immediately saw him. He caught sight of their things and froze for a moment. She was in their house. She was wearing shoes. He was already about to leave the room, but the thought still spun inside. No matter what happens, she needs to apologize for all the inconveniences. She left the room. She was buzzing around and washing the dishes. Look at her. He said hello to her. Mari approached and bowed, and greeted her again. Yuika greeted her with. A little embarrassed and thinking she was still sweet, Mari sat down in front of her. He said that she apologized for her behavior yesterday. Yesterday, it seemed her actions bothered her a lot. He laid out plates of food on the table and assured that everything was fine. She would have run away as soon as she felt uncomfortable. But she sat like that. She so meekly settled on her knees, not at all out of fear, but because she really liked her. Everyone should have breakfast together, she with. A bit confused, she looked aside and replied that she could not accept this offer. But as soon as Marie said this, her face instantly lit up and she immediately agreed. When they finished eating, she said she needed to go and pick up their equipment from the Adventurers Guild. It would not be easy. She found it hard to orient herself alone, so she asked him to go with her. They left the house. She waved to them and wished them a safe journey, and so they did reach the guild. And then the girl loudly asked in panic whether she. We need to drink beer and spend the night. That evening at his home there was nothing like that. She went shopping with him and returned. Only the next morning, there were no attacks, right? With a confused face, Wika said that actually there were no monsters in the city. She loudly and anxiously declared that she did not mean that at all. The protagonist, with a slightly confused expression, replied, he just allowed her to rest at his home. She did not manage anything else, she just fainted in the shop. Earl sharply called him a predator, ordered him to shut up and announced that he was fired. He politely introduced himself and thought that perhaps she misunderstood something. She stood between them with an irritated face. She growled fiercely and called Bari, ordering her to calm down. They hired that Sherpa, and she gave in to him as if she had a sister complex. A man with a serious face quickly ran down to him, apologized, and said that when she became the Black Princess, her reactions changed sharply. She began to behave completely differently. Wrong about everything, his name is Nuku and he plays the shortstop position. MC looked at him and smiled, saying that he was glad to meet him. A mage flew up to him, grabbed the backpack with a staff, laughed, and declared that it would be a good anchor. He is Mazakin, a sage who uses magic both for defense and for attack. He was sharply surprised upon hearing his name and asked, "Is this the legendary traveler who was?" He was called a hero for 3 different feats, but he just laughed, until Bari asked with an indignant look, "Did he just call him legendary, but he is just an old man, retired and came back?" Again, Nuku said that, by the way, this man is her father. He was also over 60 years old in both. He boasted that he was at the highest level among all. Ru was surprised. The man looked so young. Ruika approached him. He told her that she and Barry are warriors of light. She turned to Ruika and loudly blurted out, "Are you sure? Are you sure you want to take him with you?" She said calmly. "We will discuss all these details in the dungeon." She was allowed to address the princess and ask her to wait, and later they asked to reconsider the decision. After some time, they descended into the dungeon. He reached the stairs, and the protagonist immediately said that this is a shortcut for travelers of high level and above. This way they will reach the 14th floor. "It's slippery here, let them be careful." While they were descending, he said, "Today's journey goal is to reach the 47th floor. After the 3rd dive, they will be able to reach the dungeon core." Eureka explained that the dungeon core is what spawns monsters in the dungeon. This will give them an incredible amount of experience. Clearing the Tyro's dungeon will also give them some levels. She called and said she believes he knows a bypass to the next. "Stozes, on which floor is it?" "On the 19th, he replied. "They must remember, on the way they will encounter a whole pack of different monsters, and right at the beginning. Monsters that hunt in packs will be waiting for them." He listed them and especially emphasized, silver plates will be the rarest among all. She smiled and said that she understood him. This information was enough for her right now and she trusted him. Then she called Bari and Mazakina, and they understood her too. She used magic against him and stated that it's not that she likes wasting her power on him. She needs to strengthen his legs, otherwise the whole group will be slowed down because of him. About that, MC exclaimed in surprise. "So this enhances his legs, and thanks to her wind magic he accelerates speed." She answered, casting a displeased glance at the boat under the sail. "That's the name of this spell. He will need some time to get used to it." Ivica jumped forward and announced that they would run through all the remaining floors to the oasis. After that, she gave the order to move out. They rushed forward and everyone quickly ran away further. He walked together with the surprise. The expression on his face was strange, as if everything had happened too quickly, and it shouted loudly instead of him. It seemed like he was simply being blown away by the wind. He called Mazik, and he asked what kind of magic circle he had just drawn. He smiled broadly and declared, "It is a silvery, greasy coating," and began to explain exactly what kind. "Let it be oil that covers his body. It does not touch the back, however, but repels the rest of the body from any physical attacks." He was surprised by this and he snorted as if he had never heard of such a cool thing. "Oh, by the way, does he swim all the time?" Meanwhile, he burst out laughing and again started questioning, "Does love chatting, doesn't he? If he keeps this up, soon he'll run out of breath." Bari lunged forward with a stone expression on his face and thought, if this Sherpa collapsed from exhaustion, it would be even better. Ro noticed the tunnel, warned them, and she thought, let him have a calm face now, Nuku is calling. He called the Black Princess and said that they were already coming closer. 12 overhead and 7 ahead. Ivica called her, but she rushed forward. She snatched the daggers and declared that the princess could give her everything. She rushed forward and had already decided, any moment now he would start crying and beg them for a break. She immediately noticed Applebees. These are monstrous insects the size of an apple. They emit acid from their stingers easily cook meat through and through. She dealt with these monsters with daggers and a thought flashed through her mind. As soon as he starts complaining, she will immediately tell him that he is fired. Yuyuko was the central link. Link of the Twilight Sword, with her they could get through everything, one of the monsters. The others rolled past the vanguard and Nuku loudly called the Black Princess. They thought. She thought her beautiful princess does not need a man after all, she killed him. This monster with one strike of her sword and loudly said. They were told to go further and run the main hero with S. A slightly surprised look, he decided that the group had not stopped for a second, he had never seen. Have you seen that? He glanced at the map and said, at the next crossroads you need to turn left. Turn, she loudly ordered to stop. This excerpt is sealed. Is she sure there is no mistake here? He denied everything and stated, the correct path is the dead loop. Descend to the next. The next floor you can get there only through the snake corridor to their left. Yuka called her and whispered that she just has to trust him. Nuka responded with a call. She immediately understood everything and declared, it's a trap. They are going through the right passage. And it seems they have already blocked the way, probably want to stop them at any cost. MC glanced that way. He immediately said it was goblins. She looked at him and replied. He clarified, these monsters blocked the right tunnel so no one could escape. Just here fleeing, a crowd of goblins rushed straight at them and she. With a calm expression, she said he needed to hide behind the rock. He called Barry and informed that there are about 40 of them there, let them go there. After hearing the advice, he hid behind a stone. Rock assured that there are many inconspicuous places here so they need to be careful, she said in. He replied in a calm tone that they would manage. He called her by name and asked if she really did not want to go with them. She is not worried, is she? Without worrying about anything, she agreed just as calmly and said that he could leave it. He told them and they rushed forward, heading straight towards the crowd of monsters. He pulled out several small stones. He raised his hand, activated the skill finger bullet, and immediately fired. He quickly laid down several goblins and announced that now they have to enter the cave where what he left remains, and he kept shooting. They threw stones and showered with words, and in the end, only 13 monsters remained. To the left, with a stony calm on her face, she activated the spell Wind Dance magic that works instantly and enhances the strength of the body of the one who wears it. She dashed forward, glancing to the side, and she said that she found 3 and immediately dealt with them. A single attempt and the 3 monsters were gone, fast as a flash. The first dagger throw was too swift. She muttered that she barely managed to catch it. In the room, she decided that he was also a goblin. But there are those who can think, and he calmly said that trouble awaited them. It all comes down to how strong they are in thoughts. She said she would take care of those. Those above, the rest of the team peeked from behind the corner and again. And Roy thought, thanks to the local rather light mossy can, could see from a distance, their teamwork was simply impressive. Nako destroyed G. The goblins were hit by a volley. Meanwhile, Bari moved towards the goblins, taking positions that were out of sight. Distance in the frame. Staying so close to the shooting is terribly dangerous, but the armor fully PRSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSS cracks and he thought that this. In this battle, it was visible how Twilight Sword squeezes everything to the limit from its individual qualities. Truly the best team. Perhaps being chosen as a hero is cool, they continued. Without stopping for a moment, she rushes forward and deals with the goblins on the way. While walking, she glanced down from the corner of her eye and saw a necklace winding around. Grasping the monster's neck, she let out a scream, a loud, sharp shout soared into the darkness. That she did not remember how she killed the goblin with the necklace collar, which still squeezed the skin. Fainting and death both turned out to be in vain, bringing no respite. He threw a part of another monster's body at her and hit so that the air seemed to crack. She had to dodge while he tried to escape, becoming more and more dangerous with each step. Away, Nuku activated the skill shot and declared that he will not let him escape. After that, Then they called the princess and warned they were doomed. Yumika turned around, called Mazakin, and asked. He is ready, he said, and he already had a smile as if there really is a magic circle here. He poked with his finger at the protagonist said that they needed to take this boy. The boy with them, they moved on to where it seemed good for. Good for him, and he asked what he was going to do. He drew a magic circle in front of himself and used the earth. With the earth bridge spell, he blasted a passage right in front of him so loudly that the echo scattered in all directions. And this surprised him greatly. And Bari asked what happened. She was already running so we could return to him. He also asked, next the labyrinth on the 20th underground floor. She agreed and clarified if she needed to. She had to return and collect the goblin magic course. She looked at him and said it was not necessary because it was not the best deed. Magic core is a mass formed inside the monster's body. By collecting it, you have the experience needed to rise in the rankings. She said that as long as when they caught up with her and blocked the way, the monster that appeared could no longer change anything. They have to move on, she will lead and he must not fall behind. He glanced at. He looked at her with slight surprise and called Mazakin. He calmly asked what he wanted. The main character turned around and asked in response. He clarified, did Twilight Sword have any tactics on how to conserve strength? He was a little surprised and asked why he decided that way. He said that he did not touch on the team's overall policy, only spoke about the structure of Twilight Sword. Given the type of their actions and abilities, it seemed to him that this was a standard plan to lead 3 fighters in the vanguard. But in reality, everything was arranged so that she simply had no room to fight. During the last fight, she didn't even move a finger right. He quietly smiled and replied that he thought she was an ordinary guy. But it turned out that he was very attentive. He thanked him for the compliment and said, however. Moreover, he had already managed to calculate his true strength. Ivka called him by name. And he said that there was nothing wrong with it. They just needed a short stop, so they stopped at the 18th underground floor. Bari fell to the ground and said like tea. She looked so exhausted, she drank just a little water, agreed, and immediately said that she was running away from the very beginning without any pause. She called her and added that she tried so hard in the Tyros dungeon. It seemed now she had become even stronger than usual. She looked away and denied with a confused look as if about to show her ability. Ro took out a small elixir and asked if she wanted to drink a recovery elixir. He noticed her reaction and could not understand why she was so upset. So Mazakin smiled. It seems this guy has a really interesting idea. He gave her a name. He said his name and asked if he had any other skills besides profit, right? He, without losing his smile, answered, besides flying, also slow aging. No, profit is one of his special abilities. With it you can learn the nature of an object just by touching it. It can be used on both people and things. Evrika said the gift should be personal, but if he didn't mind, could he tell her what gift he had prepared? He answered with a slightly dissatisfied expression. Evrika already knew about this, right? The only gift he had was endurance recovery. Nuke wiped sweat from. He looked at him and replied that he had never heard of such a gift. Bari asked. He was asked what kind of gift it was. Musikin said, roughly speaking, it is hard for him to get tired. The protagonist clarified. He explained that such a gift is more common among monsters than humans, and that Sherpa is exactly needed because as soon as he gets tired, Sherpa got tired and wants to rest, they will abandon him, right? She felt very uncomfortable and said that it made no sense. He replied with a barely noticeable smile he showed, here it is his gift. Eureka exhaled in surprise, wonderful. In the previous dungeon they had to speed up the pace, one thing decided everything, whether Sherpa was tired, but this time, they have nothing to fear. When endurance recovers he can turn out to be much stronger, and no one wants to doubt this, everyone dreams of seeing it. He said, looking confused, that he is simply Sherpa, and then immediately blurted out a question, what will they do if he runs out of energy? She and Mazakun laughed, and he grumbled in response that it was supposed to be that way. MC asked, so do they also not get tired when endurance runs out? They need both food and water to keep in shape. She seemed to have ignored this and asked on which floor the next labyrinth would be waiting for them. He decided that she really was not listening to him at all. He looked at the map and bluntly said that it was on the 20th dungeon floor. On the floor, it is better not to leave the main road. Let them go straight to the 24th floor, that's where they will be met. He listed all the monsters living there and mentioned the manticore. The latter finally caught her attention, so he said, the local king of fauna is found only on the 23rd floor, but that doesn't mean they won't encounter him on the way. So they need to hurry. She considered everything, approved his plan, and said they would go there. He was impressed by this and said, some monsters are endowed with a special gift. Isn't it better to just avoid them? Nuku only replied, that's not a problem. He could determine how many monsters were there thanks to the enemy locator gift. If he knew the exact number, dealing with them would be much easier. He caught Ro's gaze and immediately understood. Yes, that's exactly what Ro was thinking. He asked, no matter what, they will follow her advice, right? Right? Later they reached the 23rd floor and he said that soon there would be a manticore here. Moxnabu also lived here, so they need to be careful. They passed by and said the ground here was quite moist, it even seemed a bit slippery. Bari stepped into some slime, told them about it and asked, but why is it here? He said he heard from other Sherpas, they saw a moving labyrinth. It seems the slime is trying to imitate the labyrinth, right? Yuika asked if it was possible to use the enemy pursuit. He was snooping around, looking for what they were moving towards. Nuku objected and stated that he didn't think there was any gift capable of that. No gift is capable of that. She asked if he knew where the slime was. She went ahead and said that it was somehow two's July hears he heard a growl called her and he warned ahead a monster. They ran into a manticore and she said that. With a smile, and here he is, the very manticore. This is exactly it. Right? The protagonist looked at him and asked, I wonder if the manticore always acts a little. You alone? If so, then it must be at least times stronger than other monsters living on the 23rd floor. And even monsters of the 35th level, she drew a sword from. He pulled the sword from its sheath, smiled, and said he needed to go and hide behind again. Behind the stones, he agreed, moved away and wondered if she would follow him. This time we fight, she stepped forward and declared that they should attack considering his poor stance. She and Nuku, who would even get into their head, she should distract the manticore. Bari agreed and said that, in his opinion, she would do exactly that. She should pretend to be stuck. The monster growled loudly and she covered her car with a dance of the wind and the spells of the sailor. Comrades both dashed aside, leaving her standing in place for now. The monster lunged forward, it looked at her in surprise and thought that thanks to the dance of the wind and the spells of the sailing forces, it could leap onto the cliff in one jump. He noticed that she was stuck and immediately became worried. He had no idea how she would manage to fight when the monster ran up so close. Her allies jumped into an inconspicuous place. Nuku used He uttered a spell and with a shot scattered a pile of stones that drove them forward. There was no trace left of the manticore. The monster froze the snakes. Her head opened and she began to draw magic into her mouth. Bari looked at this with an expression of surprise on his face and froze. He touched her face and said that it was lightning magic. Mazakin, with a quiet smile, also began to act. He used magic and declared that nothing could be done. He cast the dirt bridge spell. The spell worked and created a barrier in front of her, protecting her from the. He did not stop from the magical attack of the monster Nuku. He continued to strike, stubbornly, without any pause. A strike from afar and she drew a dagger, declaring that she would support him. MC watched from there, from behind cover. He caught his breath and paused for a moment. What if Yuika really did not intend to kill him? Even if it was a manticore, it seemed to him that the Twilight Sword acted deliberately. She did not seek to harm him. Judging by what she said, it seemed as if they were being forced. The monster stepped into the slime and even a mandragora could have been stuck there for at least a second. She really wanted that. At that moment, Nuku took aim. He targeted the monster to set a trap, and said that he believed, at least one of its paws will be caught. She stood nearby and said that when Bari ran, it was clear she did not know where to place her foot. It seemed as if she was trying to avoid the slime without even realizing it. Involuntarily, a question spun in his head: how to hook the manticore so that it would stop. And what if he drove it to a place where the slime would have nowhere to go? The slime was trying to escape. The manticore had already sneaked in here. The only way for the slime to get out of here was to squeeze through a narrow passage where the manticore simply could not pass. There should have long been a pile of slime there. The only problem was that now he has to find that passage and do it in this darkness. A dark and large territory. He noticed moss flying nearby and concluded there is only one passage leading here. It turned out like this, where the moss was flying from a dead end. That is there. There is a small crack here. It was not on the map. If you look from both sides. From both sides, he shouted loudly and declared that there was still space here with a pile of slime porridge up to the knees. The manticore would definitely get stuck. It was behind him on that foot of the wall. She agreed with a hint of surprise, and Nuku said. He said this, but they had not yet explored those places and knew nothing about them. About this, Bari sharply asked again. How could he possibly know what exactly was there if he hadn't seen it himself? He himself hadn't gone there. Rose replied that there was no need. They already. He had a plan map and their experience. He told all this as their Sherpa. Yuyuko was a little surprised then, smiled and loudly said that they needed to drive the manticore in that direction. Her team agreed and their attack directed the monster so that it was thrown exactly where he indicated. She called out. He caught up with her and asked where exactly that place was. She ran further and he rushed after her, clutching the map. He raised the map on his arm and confidently said that it was exactly between the rocks. As soon as they got there, the monster no longer doubted anything. It was right here. Here it smelled like a continuous slippery swamp, and he immediately got stuck in it. She seized the right moment and rushed forward to the monster and used Phantom Needle. It bit into the monster's head with the blade and sharply pulled back. He turned to them, smiled, and said that everything was done. He just an incredible Sherpa. She looked at the praise a little confused and thought, along with that, she really hit the target. The manticore would not die from a single strike. He noticed the monster when behind her back a sharp sound thundered. He loudly called and immediately warned about danger. The rest of the team froze in place. And Nuku calmly said that he did not need to worry about it. After all, he knew the prince's patronymic right. Right after he heard the refusal, he declared that her patronymic was Messenger of the Dead. Spirit, she had a gift. She could control creatures she cut with her sword, the protagonist. He was stunned when the manticore bowed before her. Yuyuko laid the sword on the monster's shoulders and said that it would be named Nico. Bari, surprised, said that it was simply the worst name in history. Nuku stood nearby and agreed he was curious about what was that name. She turned to them, stroked the head of the manticore, and said she had quite a useful ability. Nah. They need to move on so that their target is on the 47th underground floor. Where to next? He thought and said that it seemed they needed to go to the 20. On the 25th floor, they continued their path, and he thought about the victories of Twilight's sword and the manticore. They were spectacular, worth seeing. Nico captured every monster she encountered, and she applied her gift to them, step by step, building her own army. Within a day, there were dozens of monsters there. Monsters. The Twilight Swords team is cutting through monsters. They reached the 40th floor where they encountered a minotaur, its body like a human's. A man with a bull's head, incredible strength bordering on legend, exceptional and endurance, thick muscles, and high resistance to blows. When this monster was exhausted after battles with other monsters, Yuika approached him and used Phantom Needle, calling it Minoran, and warned, taming this monster is not easy. Together with Nika, their task is to locate enemy positions. They continued on foot, and MC was spinning in his head the memory of how they first met. In Sherpa Guild, she stated that Twilight Sword is a team of 4 people, strong enough to fight on equal terms with several large league groups at once. When he heard this for the first time, he thought she was just talking nonsense, but now there were no doubts about their strength. On the way, they encountered 15 skeleton warriors, intelligent monsters with swords and shields, who formed groups and moved together. Ivica, with such a serious face that tension was felt under the skin, called Nico and Minoran, and said they needed to deal with the advanced ones. The enemy is already pressing from all sides. BU4 must retreat under cover. Nuki and Bari encircle the opponents and finish off those whom BU5 and BU7 pushed back and bypassed. They agreed immediately, and Ro stood aside, turning over in his mind the thought. The powerful abilities of each party member plus the destructive power of monsters unquestionably make Twilight Sword the strongest team. Suddenly, a skeletal warrior core fell into Ro's field of vision. It broke on the floor, and Ro focused on it. Then the thought about monster achievements, a type of equipment that drops, flashed through his mind. And it was exactly that. The monsters were already defeated, but they were knocked off their spots by blows, so Ro began collecting the fragments, deciding that he had to give it. As soon as they finished the fight with the monsters, he thought to gather them all at her place and find out what rank they had. 7 skeleton warriors were added to the group, so now there were 17 monsters in the squad. Aika looked at them intently and said what it was. It seemed the time had come to heal the wounds and encourage everyone. She slightly roused the monsters and she began to use it. Use magic and say that they all must stay in their places. She drew a large magical circle over the crowd of monsters and cast a healing spell. It impressed him and he said he had never seen such a magical circle. Mazakin said with a smile, "It is a gift from the Princess Healing. Usually such magic is applied to other monsters only by monsters." He could not believe it and thought, could she also have such magic? When the spell reached the monsters, their wounds healed extraordinarily quickly. And he decided that it was synergy grown thanks to compatibility. Gifts or their combination. This is called Renka. Simply put, Phantom Needle is used to manipulate monsters. Monsters and healing is applied to restore the physical strength of these monsters. This is the best Renka. She is the best adventurer specializing in labyrinth capture. Yuika turned to them and asked if it was time for them to rest as well. His team agreed, and he felt that someone among them had something special for this amazing leader. Some held themselves like a royal vassal, others like a suzerain. Everyone was ready to act so that Jerenka would be safe. She pointed to the dark cave and said that they needed to continue the path to the next floor a little later. They continued diving deeper into the dungeon, and he thought, when planning a dive, the most important thing is the party level. Each floor corresponded to its own level exactly, the one needed to pass it considering the adventure rank. Ranks, Twilight Sword Party was at level 12, and Manticore's hunting grounds on the 23rd floor, so this corresponded to level 6. Minotaur 40th floor corresponded to level 13. They removed both floors immediately without any problems. The dive report had to state that the entire process lasted only 2 days. Usually it would take 10 days, and such an incident would definitely cause a stir. While they were settling in, their camp was set up near the oasis on the 47th floor. The current floor was 47, and the corresponding level was 15. Monster hunting had already been going on for 4 days, and it was here that they encountered creatures with the skills they had. He had a human torso and a snake-like lower body. It was cruel, used sharp claws as weapons, and had incredible physical strength. The strength was stunning. The protagonist said that monsters living at such a depth could wipe out an entire squad. So you have to keep your ear sharp. Iveka smiled confidently and said they had nothing to fear. She ordered to bring 6 skeletons, let them guard. These monsters paused for a moment and immediately rushed forward. They barely held the attack. Skill attack, nails with the help of shields, and even snakes rose biting their legs. She thundered a statement that it was pointless. Since the poison did not affect her subordinates, she turned to her own. On the 7th, I ordered them to break through their flank. Skeleton immediately listened to her words cautiously. Bounced off the cliff, rushed forward to the monsters and hit right one of them. He struck the sword in the back but could not pierce the tough. That skin, however, after his attack, a powerful explosive wave burst out and it killed the monster. MC watched this in surprise from the side end and wondered, is this a gift of influence? Nuku raised her eyes and loudly said, this is. Something was coming through the ceiling. Bari also looked there and loudly said what it was. It was a huge slime. He also fixed his gaze and loudly said, it is slime. Slime prince capable of dissolving even metal. Ivika immediately shouted, stay away from this monster. As soon as everyone scattered, he immediately threw the phrase, close combat will not work. She called Oink from 1st to 4th and stated that they have. Keep distance and strike with spears, Mazakand. He called Black Princess and immediately said, the skill has already broken through the defense. From 5 to 8 without pauses, she called Oink and ordered them to deal with them. Ro looked at this and decided, time to deploy her monsters, that is, their special abilities. Thanks to this tactic, the whole party retains strength and it is really wonderful. He called her and said that it sounds so loud here. If the fight drags on, other monsters will gather at the sound and arrange a real carnival here. Attention, this is what they call a situation when hordes of monsters converge in one place and stretch out a series of battles. Battles? She stopped and asked which of the already gathered monsters would be the most problematic. He answered, Jelly Toads and the underground garrison. Mazakin glanced aside, smiled, and threw out, by the way, something is approaching. They are sneaking up. Bree heard the rumble of approaching monsters and shouted loudly, and agreed that these were jelly warm toads. These monsters bombarded their victims with a continuous stream. The liquid accumulating on their bodies. Ivica looked at the monitor. She looked at the monsters and asked, "It's like a water cannon, right?" and then called Nico. Nico said she needed to cast the lightning trap spell because everyone was already in danger. Neutralize them, the manticore did it and all. All the frogs were paralyzed, she said, maintaining a calm smile. That lightning magic works well against water monsters. She called Minotaur in and said he had to kill them with one blow. The Minotaur. The animator stepped forward, swung his huge axe and struck the monsters. He cut with the flat side and he even froze from what happened. She turned away and said, "This is much bigger, F." He dealt with them one by one and just then Nuku, the Black Princess, was summoned and informed that 4 more were approaching. The hero became worried, called her, and said that 4 monsters were hiding on this floor. Probably it was a garrison. They were gathering troops, so it seemed there were no gaps left in their defensive lines. At that moment they were 2 formidable opponents. An indescribably cold gust of wind blew near them. Bari shivered from the cold and asked if it was snow magic. Nuku looked away and said that the orc and the slime trail Prince Weref. They were frozen. Mazakin laughed as soon as he saw several silhouettes in the darkness. And he said how lively this carnival is going, the underground garrison which was. With lesser demons, armed with various equipment who were thrown to the lower levels, came to join them. Ivica raised her sword and said with a smile that they have a mage. It seems he is also skilled with the sword. Bari called the princess and asked what they should do with these skills. She said that she and Nuku need to work on this, help the skeletons, and not forget to be careful with snake venom. With a joyful smile, she addressed the princess. Could she heal her if the monsters bit her, right? Echo grinned. She would have already run off to fight other monsters called Nico. Echo and Minoran insist that in some time they will have to recruit them into their army. They stopped in an oasis on the 47th floor, and the host finally gave the signal to leave the route. He said that this carnival gave him goosebumps, and it seems now he finally understood where they constantly got such unusual trophies from. Ivica laughed, picked him up and threw in that however they were. She gave them all 4 only thanks to him. The appearance of stronger monsters was their goal. That way they could strengthen their own armed forces. She started eating soup and added, by the way, he cooks deliciously and she simply adores this soup. He was glad to hear this and told Yoku that. He said that it was a miracle to be able to eat salad so deep underground. He turned to him with a smile and said, "After all, they set a fast pace." He heard the kettle boiling and said that Sarbo tea was already ready. He handed her a cup of tea and fell silent, lost in thought. And thought that if you count with the manticore under her command there were 50 monsters in total. From extra. Her face showed she was completely exhausted. A potion would help, but it seems first she needs to restore her strength with delicious food. He started cutting meat and said that the main thing. One of the courses smoked meat. Tastes better if sliced thinly, but Marie prefers to eat it like this. She chews it in a sandwich, and with an expression of surprise says that she told him about it while they were eating together. He smiled and said that they, of course, often do that at home, and Marie remembered the time spent with him. The girl with a smile on her face blushed with embarrassment. Harassment, he said that while she was sleeping, his sister was pulling, she was having a lot of fun, but she would mind playing with her again. She nodded and an overly happy expression immediately appeared on her face. As soon as that expression passed and they started talking again, Mary looked at them from the side and remembered that eternally cold beauty. It impresses and fascinates like a flawless print. Can a princess make such a face? So what kind of freak managed to arrange such a thing? When they finally finished. After finishing washing the dishes, Mazakin asked, "Since the meal is over, it's time to check what they got." Maybe he will tell everything they gathered on the ground. Roy nodded, agreed. They untied the trophies and laid out on the ground everything they got from the monsters. Everyone rushed to look and Bari just remained sitting right there. They eat soup, he said. The lower the floor, the more variety there is. Elements, Nuku asked, a bit surprised. How did he manage to gather all this? He calmly replied that he simply found the time. This is the time between battles, picking up what has fallen and collecting demonic cores, that's his job. He said this with a tense look. The fact that he spoke so evenly, but gathered everything himself without outside help was incredibly difficult. A gift of endurance. Restoring stamina is simply unreal. He even asked, as if casually, did he really think so? Mazakin looked over what they had obtained and said that probably half of it would really come in handy. The armor and weapons of monsters are cursed, so those who wear them will have a very hard time. Yueka asked if it was made by the Dark Blacksmith. The main character replied, yes, by the way. He heard that Dark Blacksmiths forge high CL-class equipment from ore mines and dungeons. Some of them are even capable of forging magical items, illuminated by gifts and specific effects. Note, the Dark Blacksmith is a special type of lesser demon who arms humanoids living deep in dungeons. Dungeons, he warned. Dealing with cursed items is deadly dangerous. They lower status and also drain physical and magical power. So all parties reject such items. She said that this will not bring income. On the surface, there was no benefit. They heard the demons say that it was. It was simply insulting after all, they had put their soul into it. As soon as it sounded, the team immediately got nervous. He heard her and sharply, loudly warned about the danger behind. The demon pressed a knife to her throat and ordered exactly that. What humans cannot afford, the monster called a premium service. They called the princess with frightened voices, and the demon only said, "Such types of weapons are incredibly effective for killing adventurers." Buri loudly declared that he must immediately release the princess. Immediately, and they immediately prepared for battle, and she did not even suspect that soon the question would begin. Something and everything froze. The demon Arvanitz twitched away from her, jumped over, stopped and threw a question. "Are you asking him?" Then she would have to listen very carefully. He has no name, those dark smiths, they just. As soon as they mentioned him, he was already among them. It became easier that way. MS looked at him and immediately decided, this is definitely strange. Strange, there shouldn't be monsters here that can talk, according to the records. Although high-level monsters understand language, they do not speak, they only act, as if instinct controls everything. There is no point in talking, especially with those who have already become victims. This is not the only thread. Strangeness, all team members broke away and rushed to the princess, calling her. She called Nuka, clenching her face in anxiety, and asked what happened to his detection skill. Nuka replied, he doesn't know, he doesn't feel demonic energy at all. Mazakun with a serious face asked, this guy, could it be him or was he simply not given such a skill? The demon approached the controlled monsters and said that if you think about it. They were upstairs on the top floor, why go down here, she ordered the first one. First the first one and immediately the second, to grab him immediately. After that, the monsters attacked the dark blacksmith and he easily repelled the attack. He deftly dodged their attacks and loudly declared. He said it was very close. He caught Ro's attention with F. He closely watched every step of this demon. And he watched him closely again, once more. They dodged the monster's attack and they were summoned by a court subpoena. He was gone and everyone froze in surprise. Next to Evica, he suddenly appeared out of thin air, stepped on the blade of her sword and pressed it to the ground. This confused him and at that moment he decided, so this is teleportation. He leaned forward, smiled and said this. It turns out she was controlling them. He twitched and sharply asked what was wrong with him. He jumped back from her and muttered, well. A deadly aura gave him goosebumps. He teleported right to her and said this. Only he was here and met them, he patted him on the shoulder. He touched the same shoulder and asked as if he hadn't pointed a gun at him, they could very well become friends. He turned to him. He looked at him, smiled and said he was pleased, so he would answer a few questions. He asked with a confused expression as if searching for an answer. The smile did not disappear. A smile appeared on his face, and he said he was quite an interesting person. I liked it, but unfortunately he still had to deliver it. Make sure he can't stay, they will drown. A little lower and to the right and they will definitely have a chance to meet again. They must not perish and must remain. Rotten corpses, people are so interesting, especially those who died recently. He was about to. He disappeared and Bari turned to the princess, if she was okay. Eureka kept a calm expression. Nuku came closer and said everything was fine. She assured this happened for the first time they met a monster without demonic energy, so nothing can be done now. The main character replied that they already knew this, the dark blacksmith, but there is no record of his abilities in the Sherpa Guild. She said that she had never encountered anything like this in other dungeons in the dungeons of Tyros. There were monsters they did not know. Clearing the dungeon completely is a risky business. Fact, it was a test of their determination as adventurers. Adventurers with a slightly tense face, he thought that. But the level of risk suddenly turned out to be much higher than they had imagined. She said with a smile, this is. It was quite interesting, and her desire to clear this dungeon grew stronger and stronger. And honestly, the best thing that happened to them in these 4 days of monster hunting. This secret passage led down to the lower floors. It seemed they just had to descend to the 48th floor, he asked. His question was met with surprise. Had they only agreed on this then? They agreed on the 47th floor. She turned to him and said that they would make changes to the contract. She smiled and added that she did not want to interrupt the dive after what that monster did to her. To her, MC said that no one had ever stepped on the floor below. There were not only monsters there but also. But there was no information about this place. They needed to get to the surface and replenish supplies before moving on. That was his advice, like the Sherpas. She agreed and asked again, I understand, but at the same time. So what? How could one of the Twilight Sword squad not be sure that he would endure, pass through, and explore the 48th floor? He looked confused. He thought that when she said that it meant they work as a team and he the legend. The legendary sage did not use any offensive magic at all, so Mazuakin yawned loudly and said that. After such a heavy meal, he nodded off his side and thought. In other words, they still have an ace up their sleeve. He took a deep breath and said that it was unfair because he had nothing to respond with. She smiled apologetically and said that she felt he would listen to her decision until the end. Decision, he was confused and asked, what does that mean? So this is how. How does she endure this? She laughed, smiling, and asked, does he really think so? Buri, angered by their conversation, jumped between them and loudly declared that Twilight Sword is capable of handling anyone. Anyone could have done it anytime and without his help, and that was exactly what threw him off track. So he muttered that probably he had no choice anyway. He would just listen to her. He said it was wonderful and then let them set off into the unknown. Later, they went down to the 48th floor in the dungeon and he thought, this is immersion in an. What had never been on the map was approaching. He said that the luminous moss was very high. And here a lot of mana concentrated, but this surface is not the best support, take it. Harry threw out with a contemptuous half-smile. As if to say, by the way, now that they are already here, there is almost no use in it. Now he is incapable of anything, right? Roy agreed and thought. As soon as he arrives on the surface where no person has yet set foot. It had already become customary. Sherpas were used to relying on the experience and instincts of travelers first. A map had to be drawn. They also had to take notes about the surroundings. They moved on and Bree called the princess and said, to reach the oasis here. They reached it and Nuku said that he had. He noticed the monster ahead and Bis caught her attention. And she asked if it was higher than the oasis. She looked there and surprised said that she actually saw something, a huge grape cannon. Even if something remained here, she was sure there was 0 sense in it, and for her it was absolutely uninteresting. On the way here, they did not encounter any monsters, but she still confidently pulled forward. Someone was still burning with the desire to pass through this place. She could have simply told me if they had already found the oasis, the very one that means. The goal is achieved, Ueka. Monica agreed. She said they just needed a little rest and then return to the surface. The protagonist cast an interested glance, and Bari was even shining, as if the answer had already ripened somewhere in his head. They said that then this plant must be cut down. The night seed that this monster dropped could be such. It was sold for a very good price, because it was for regenerative medicine, so he continued to look around. He looked at it and decided, the cannon with the vine is a common plant mob. Monster, it was worth looking closer, and it attacked travelers too. Throwing seeds from its tubular pods at them, even novices could easily defeat this monster. What is this plant which usually clings to the upper floors doing here? Its leaves and tubes are a bit different. He turned to them and said loudly, this is not a sample rifle, do not touch it. As soon as he said this, Bari had already bitten off a piece of this monster's vine. Immediately after that, a powerful explosion thundered. A bunch of thorns flew off the plant and hit him, and he felt his strength ebbing away. These thorns were poisoned. He treacherously called the others with a tired voice and asked if they were okay. He saw the whole team. The participants were injured, they couldn't even move from their place. He fell to the ground and thought that. He thought it was just getting cold, but his hands and feet did not obey at all, they did not move. The body seemed to melt, dissolve. Is this death? Yuyuko approached. She cast the spell Dark Dewdrop. She pronounced these words and called out so that he would wake up. He heard her voice. Her voice broke off, but immediately consciousness returned. She suddenly sat up and shouted loudly. For her, she said that she had cast a healing spell, so the poison must disappear from his body. It seems she did exactly that. She removed all the spikes from him, so he still needed to check again just in case. He thanked her, asked her to wait, and inquired if she pulled him out with her bare hands and said that he didn't need to worry about it. He sharply dropped his backpack on the ground and said that he would now get the healing elixir. But still she was bleeding, he will give her the healing elixir. She objected, now is not the time. It was visible how the poison was rapidly spreading throughout the body. So first they needed to save the others. He rushed after her and reached out. He offered his help, looked around and froze, lost in thought. The oasis had disappeared as if dissolved into the air. How huge it had been. It was an explosion. If not for the effect of the silvery oily coating, they would definitely have died. They approached Bari, examined her, and he decided that she was terribly horrible. She managed to protect her eyes, but the rest no. Her face and body, he called her and said that she must use. He took everything out with tweezers. I grabbed it, nodded, and to get. As soon as it was over, both started pulling out the needles. Done, I cast magic on her and she quickly recovered. Consciousness, Yuika called her and asked if she was okay. She nodded and he handed her a vial of potion and ordered her to drink. Drink this. Mazakin rushed forward and unable to hold back shouted, Black Princess, and whispered to her not to forget about him. If I die here, the world will not survive this loss. They did not have time to argue, only one needle hit him, but he only replied that it was. It was good that the gift to enhance held on his cloak. Later they also healed Nuka, she looked exhausted. He said that only monsters remained and MC immediately approached closer. MC closed the distance and gave her a dose of potion. She thanked and promised to place an order. He ordered them to guard her. Mazakin rushed to Bari and gently hit her on the head with a stick. He turned to the staff and assured, this is exactly the best time to apologize. She called him an irritable old man but still obediently sighed, obeyed and asked for forgiveness. Nuka approached them and said that only Roa felt the danger so she was not to blame. Healing magic is a thing available only to a few. Then it turns out that if it worked for the Black Princess, he himself would admit that he would have done the same. In any case, for an ordinary plant monster, he had too much strength and poison. It could be that this also. Bare floor, he said that usually they consider plants weak, but now they will have to change their minds. Everyone instantly turned around as soon as Yuika fell to the ground. Russell and WH. Bari rushed forward, reached her and caught her in his arms. With anxiety asked what was wrong with her, he sat down nearby and said that everything must be because of the poison. She was surprised by this and loudly declared that this is impossible. The princess has resistance level 3, she is unshakable. He was unshakable not only to burns or stun, but to any influence at all. And he was sure that this is already the case at level 3. This resilience could withstand almost everything, yet still did not reduce the probability to 0 by 100. More precisely, 100. He asked exactly that. As soon as this was said, she no longer applied dark drops of dew on herself. Nuku with a tense face firmly cut off. This does not work on a magic caster. This confused him. He noticed her breathing is weakening, so he warned if it continues like this, her life will be in danger. Does anyone have medicine or potion against poison? He did not take any supplies with him and did not replenish anything before leaving. Bari said that for them, Twilight Sword medicine is not needed. They no longer had anything left. There were so many poisons that the empty space had to be filled with potions to somehow restore the mana. He calculated everything in his head, and eventually it became clear. Their plan depended on Yuika's physical condition. He noticed how she was vainly trying to say something. He approached and asked what had happened. She was writhing. His pain was tearing him apart, and at some point he decided her speech had become incomprehensible. Listen, he said that soon she would start to delirium. Mazukin remembered something and, speaking aloud with anxiety, suddenly fell silent. Subtly shown this is bad, he stopped using levitation and retreated from them, the protagonist. He saw all this with his gaze and immediately understood. He was going where his mother was. Monsters guarded them. He sneaked up to these monsters and with a serious expression froze on his face, he fired a beam. About the banishment of light. He was sure it would work, waited for the spell to end and blew up everything that was left. Monsters. This confused him, so he sharply asked why they needed to be removed. Nuku said, if the Black Princess loses consciousness, the effect of the Phantom Needle will disappear, and he immediately understood. He thought that then all these monsters would close in on them. Even such a devastating gift has a weak spot, he said. He promised that he would cure her and immediately added, first, the backpack must be taken away. He laid out his tools and various potions nearby, and admitted he was not sure if it would work, but he would still try to mix some medicine. Medicine, she needs to be laid horizontally on the ground. He poured something into a mortar and ordered to start with stimuli. Stimulator, he brought a finger with medicine to her face and said it would be wonderful. It would be wonderful if the sharp smell could wake her up. The week had already begun. She responded to the smell with intermittent sounds, but still remained unconscious. MC looked at her and immediately understood. The breathing was still weak. He needed a cardiotonic. He prepared it and decided that it should be mixed with. Take some water and give it to her, just in case, he said he needed to. I need to ask something, is any one of them dating her, Bari A? He froze with a confused expression on his face. What is he talking about? He took. He clenched the medicine in his mouth and asked, does this mean no? She froze in surprise and he leaned over her and he moved her to Wiku and stubbornly, without blinking, poured the medicine directly into her mouth. She swallowed the medicine with a kiss. And Nuku immediately noticed her approaching them, so she ordered to stop. Stop, she stepped back, dashed aside, managed and threw the medicine into her mouth. And said that she would do so. He asked her to wait and said that there is a trick how to make an unconscious person drink medicine. She did not listen and this caused a terrifying attack, forced her to cough loudly. He immediately became embarrassed and rushed to watch over her. He said exactly that. It was the same line, but this time it didn't work. Princess, he thought with a worried look, that the poison had weakened her heart, so that's what the cardiotonic should have helped with, but he no longer had it. It's true. He squeezes a candy made from mental strength extracted from the potion. It was made to strengthen the mind, so the candy would keep her conscious. He crushed the candy to powder with a stone, poured it into her mouth, and that's it. And then he splashed some water, poured the medicine into her mouth. Anouk called him with an anxious face, and he asked if he was sure about this medicine. He gave him a brief look. After that, he began to take off his outerwear and said, honestly, I didn't know about this. This is not enough for proper treatment. They need return to the surface as soon as possible and find someone who can cure her. With magic, does anyone know spells that enhance endurance? He covered her with his clothing, and Mazukin said he could cast a few spells at a basic level. The main character explained, then sometimes you have to throw it on her, otherwise, when the effect of the medicine wears off, this will be the end for her. He picked up Yuika in his arms and Bari extended hers and assured that she could carry the princess. He looked at her and said that even if on the way here they destroyed most of the monsters, he was sure many still remained. She, together with Sir Nuku, had to be ready for anything, and she agreed with that. After that, they all rushed together to the exit of the dungeon. He ran alongside her. She asked if he was sure he could manage without a map. He replied, he remembers the path they are taking. So there was no problem. He clearly indicated the direction to him. And he asked him to wait, grumbling that he sensed two monsters. Wait, they are just above them and their number is increasing. This is blood. Bedbug cockroaches note, these monsters suck blood from the still living. As soon as the victims remain alive, they lay eggs there and they do it incredibly fast. He called her. He asked if she could cast a sales spell on them. She agreed and he loudly said, then they need to get rid of what? Faster, he decided they must get to the surface as quickly as possible. They moved on. He raced along the 48th floor, intently looking at Yuika's face, and gathered thoughts about saving other lives in his mind. Others, and along with that, endure unbearable pain from the poison. But she had incredible abilities. Squeezing her tighter, he lost track of time again and thought. He would not let her die in such a place, although sometimes he had to think about it just the same. A little later, on the 41st floor of the dungeon, they took a short break and MC said he had given her a dose of sedatives. That was why she was only one step from death. This will prevent the poison from spreading further through her body. They were very worried, and Mazakun calmly explained, this slows the blood and it begins to clot. After all, this was originally used as a poison. So does he want to use this effect to block the action of another poison? He nodded and said they could only wait. Iveka opened her eyes and everyone immediately noticed it. Without hesitation, he called to the princess and she very quietly asked where they were. Bari and Nukud. He did not have time to understand what she had just said before he replied, now they are on the 41st floor. They were supposed to go there. To reach the surface and take her to the healer. He gave her some medicine, but later she would have to drink more. That's how it should be. It was incredibly hard. She had to learn to breathe. Everything depended only on her decision to live. Live, she tried to say, but the words scattered in fragments. He asked, barely smiling. She means by willpower she is the best here. That was exactly what was expected of her, so she had to keep the pace. He began to get up and shouted to Nuku. He lunged at him and said, you have the gift to restore endurance and you still carry. All of this was already too much for him. Is it really better to throw away the backpack to move faster? He picked up. He picked her up in his arms and immediately said that he had planned to do this back there as soon as his legs got tired, although they had just held on. The goal was still far away, so there was no reason to panic. She called him by name. He turned to her and slowly asked what happened. She tried to say at least something, but her voice barely moved from exhaustion. He immediately understood. She was asking why he was helping so sincerely. Rose said that there was no sense here. But there was a special reason. Was it really necessary to save the person he loved? Her surprise and facial expression. Bari's face turned red and it made him angry. He grabbed the other by the shoulder and loudly. Apparently that's exactly how it sounded in his head. How dare he say such a thing at such a time? Yet Bari asked calmly. Calmly, although Bari could have looked as if she was boiling with anger inside. It turns out she still had a lot of strength left, right? She was confused by this. And he turned around asking Nook how he was feeling. He replied that everything was fine and added, if needed, they should drink a potion that restores endurance. And now they moved on. After some time, Aveka came to in the clinic and loudly surprised exclaimed, what the hell is going on here? The doctor who touched her with his magic gasped in surprise and thundered, this is a clinic. She has nothing to fear from his healing magic. She exhaled a little and she reached the exit and said in a dissatisfied voice that since she was already able to move, it was time for them to get out of here. Mazakin sat nearby. She apologized to him for the interference and sincerely thanked him for the help. A moment ago she was squinting, as if she was drowning in the depths of the dungeon chamber. She remembers almost nothing. Probably on the way here she fainted. He called the Black Princess and said that it was good she was fine. She agreed and asked, tell me exactly what happened. He smiled and replied that she was so impatient. Even then, when she was already on the brink of death, under the guidance of this young Sherpa they managed to return to the surface in just one day. Of course they tried them. They struggled with all their might not to get into a fight, but how could she have thought that they would just escape from the 48th floor? And he didn't encounter anyone, only young people. The young Sherpa kept her face impassive even in such a situation. She asked where Barry and Nuka were now, and he replied that they had been separated. While she was choosing the shorter path, there was only one exit, so she shouldn't have worried. He apologized and said that his daughter's recklessness almost killed her. Calmly, without changing her expression, she looked back at the room and said, it's okay, let him not worry. And she was guilty of something too. This wouldn't have happened if she had acted more carefully. She recalled how the main hero helped them in the dungeon and said that he really saved them. He agreed with. He smiled and said that this hero helped her the most. This young man passed the medicine mouth to mouth and she was quite embarrassed. Then he stated that Bari even counted how many times he did that. 7 times, he rushed to the exit and said he would pay the bill, gold only for one spell, here it is, robbery. She looked at him with a confused face. Did that really mean that she kissed him, or what? By the way, she could still taste the medicine. She knew too bitter, who would have thought that her first kiss. The kiss left a taste of medicine, and at that moment he reached for the clinic and called the doctor. The director asked how Yuika was feeling. He came to her room, spoke to her, but she seemed not to hear, not to pay attention. She thought she was living in some fantasy like other girls. But everything turned out completely different from what she imagined, even though because to save her life, so she must be grateful. And then he said there was no special reason. She is not sure what exactly he was trying to convey to her. How to look him in the eyes now. He approached her bed and called again. She noticed him, and at that moment she was overwhelmed with shame. She sharply raised her voice and asked how long he had been sitting there. He said plainly that he had just arrived, and everything they pulled out during the dive was left in the Travelers Guild. Both Nuka and Bari are now resting at the inn. She, awkwardly glancing at him, asked, "By the way, can she ask you something?" He agreed, and she has to, He muttered uncertainly that his words are here in the dungeon. She was immediately interrupted. The doctor, who sharply called MC's name, and pronouncing each word with displeasure, stated that he is unable to enjoy alcohol. Alcohol while they were still here. He already had to get them out of here. He turned to him and said that he does not consider it normal to drink during working hours. It was the best idea. The doctor asked him to be quiet. He turned to her, stared apologetically, and said that he always behaved like that. She can move, right? She agreed, and he added that it was time for them to go. Then he rushed outside. Near the door he thanked the doctor, but the doctor just closed it in front of them. They walked down the street, and he only said that he would return as soon as he took them to the tavern. His sister was still with relatives, so he needed to pick her up from there. Lift her up? Yuyuka said that was right. First they needed to show Mari so she would calm down. He agreed. The man approached and said he recognized that noble appearance. Could it be? And it really was him, Lord Sage. Mazakun turned to him and confirmed, yes. She looked around and asked who he was. Ro called him Mayor Baraman, and he replied with a joyful expression that he was pleased. She was stuck thinking about how they got to that evening. He didn't understand what she was talking about, but she remembered that day the three of them, he and Mari, went to a restaurant. He asked if it was a neglected place, or if he interrupted something. She objected and said that the 3 short dives at first were planned, but they only managed the first one. Their goal remained unchanged, to completely clear the Tyros dungeon. So now they had already reached the 48th floor. It is still unknown. The report was supposed to be submitted later. He did not recognize her, and Mazakun said that she was the leader of the Extinguished Sword. Baraman was stunned. So this is the Black Princess. She set a record in such a short time, simply incredible. He asked for permission to invite her again to another event, but didn't finish speaking. Yueka said she appreciated his kindness. Her mission is to go through and cleanse all the dungeons in this world. The world looked at the main character and asked, by the way, who is he? Came the reply. He introduced himself and said he was from Sherpa Guild. He remembers this. He remembered and said what he had heard, that he was very talented for such a young age, and he thanked. He said, yes, but I am not worthy of such admiration. And then, with a smiling look, he added that the famous heroes of the East, and the best Sherpa in the city, and he was simply fantastic. She called the mayor and said they needed to rest, so she apologized. Mazakun, smiling broadly, stated that he did not mind skipping the dinner party. She apologized, nodded, and called him, and all 3 set off. Bearman watched them for a long time. Mazakun said that just a few days after the first dive, they explored a new level, and then he came. She visited Sherpa Guild and greeted Jim. Jim responded to her in kind. He called him Little Barry and asked if she just wanted to find out who came at such a. In an hour, he sighed with a smile and said that it was time for her to stop looking at him as a child. He was already over 40. She herself was 40 years old and replied that his name was too difficult to pronounce. What did he after all want? He was silent for a few seconds, and then she said that he was. Let him not worry, everyone had already gone home and she stayed here. He remained alone. He called himself MC and reported that he was now working with the squad, the Heroes of the East. He heard that they were exploring the dungeon at an abnormal speed. They had already reached the 48th floor. She nodded and, smiling, said that they knew this. Currently she is updating the maps in the guild, and as soon as he said these words, she was suddenly jerked by surprise. But the topic he truly wanted to raise with her further was simple. She should reconsider her attitude towards him. She was about to ask something, but he anticipated. After the death of his parents, the only family is. His family is his younger sister. She asked where he knew this from, and he replied that Gunji told him about it in a bar. He spoke as if Marie was his sister. She did not like it. She clenched her fingers. She clenched her hand into a fist and asked, so what? He said it was nothing, and he did not try to make her do anything about it. Twilight Sword still remained a very important guest for them, but he had one demand. He asked to protect his sister. How much? How much could he disgrace his Sherpa pride? The next morning after the dive, Ivake knocked on On Ro's door he called his name and asked if he was home. Marie heard. He recognized her voice. Joy spread through him and immediately declared that it was his sister speaking. He quietly smiled and asked to open the door. She opened immediately and replied, "Welcome." She greeted her with her own words. With a smile he asked how she was. She already instantly noticed a human silhouette. His silhouette was very close and then he suddenly slipped out from behind the door, so she saw Nook, who unexpectedly turned out to be. Something threatening came from her. It even shook. She apologized for. He said it confidently and assured her there was no need to worry. He was her friend and fear covered her like a wave until she was introduced. She herself told him her age. He stood silently, but as soon as she called, he immediately apologized. Bodlow introduced himself, stated his age, and added that he was sincerely grateful for their acceptance. This embarrassed her a little, so she asked what he was doing here. There was no need to hold on to her age. The protagonist approached, wiped his hands with a towel, and asked what brought him here. "They brought them here," she replied, and apologized for disturbing him so early in the morning. "Good morning." She wanted to express her gratitude to him, but he was eager to talk to him about the dive report. He let them inside, and after some time Nuku came out of his house and said he was counting on him. He called the lady and asked her to return by sunset, otherwise Barry would get angry again. She agreed. When he left, she turned around, apologized, and whispered that she didn't know. Apparently they were going on a picnic. And he disappeared so suddenly. In a calm voice he said she didn't need to worry, everything was fine. The traveler's report and the Sherpa's report. If this doesn't add up, they will be called later, they will sort out the details. It's good that they managed to discuss everything before submitting the reports. She was a little surprised by his reaction. And he said with a slightly dissatisfied expression that Nuku had always been very strict about this issue. It was true, she no longer remembered how many times she had heard him say that. It really mattered. Mario approached her and, a little nervously, Hesh addressed Hisher's sister and asked if she wanted to join them for the picnic. Yuhiko stared in surprise and asked if she really could. MC nodded in response with a friendly smile and said. She said that she really wanted her to go with them. She thanked for the invitation and agreed to go with them. Later they came to me and again said that she really wanted her to go with them. They arrived at the forest outside the city. She rushed forward, called her sister, and declared that here they collect Gajabarii and insisted on it without any concessions. He urged her on to go faster, but she pulled slower, calling by name and warning that running like that was dangerous, one could fall. Mari stopped by the bush. She started picking berries and assured that they would make incredibly tasty jam, added somewhat surprised that she was good at it, smiled happily and confirmed. She knew even more. Any rabbit can be sold for a good price, but if you mix those with good meat with those with bad meat, you won't expect big sales. And also the vegetables in the store opposite their house are always run. Her brother showed her all this. But as soon as Yuika looked at him with a very displeased face and said so, it immediately became clear, that's how it is. He immediately began to worry and thought, well, he just wanted to teach her a few tricks that might come in handy in life. After some time, he probably overdid it. The girls fell asleep on the blanket. He looked at them, barely smiled, and thought that he was a father. It seems they both finally calmed down. He heard from Sir Mazakin, she won't be able to sleep while the phantom needle is working. Now everything fell into place. During the dive, she didn't sleep a single minute and they spent almost a week in the cave. That's why their team avoids long dives. Then why did he choose exactly those words? Perhaps he was touched by the thought of how she suffered from the poison and was forced to rely on. By the force of her own will she made him feel it. She needed a reason to. Wait, of course it can be explained, but if it were really true. Isn't it so? Case can be found among many other words, right? For example, something about diving. He slid his gaze over her face and thought. He thought that she was incredibly beautiful. He also admired her courage and her soul. When difficulties arise in her path and how quickly she tears them down and overcomes them. Me too, and that expression on her face when she sees Mari, it seems. It seems he likes children and also the willpower he saw in him. The dungeon, it seems now he understands. These words are bursting out. He let it slip from his lips exactly as his heart suggested. So, now it is even easier for him to breathe. Ro called her by name and assured that his word. He closed his eyes and felt now everything became clear to him. Suddenly Yuika woke up, grabbed him by the collar and with him. Embarrassed, he asked with the same expression on his face, is he telling the truth? Ruth was confused by this now but still agreed and she decided that it was truly a confession. She quietly asked confused because she had not yet fully realized everything. So there is more than one of them. She may have never been in a relationship, but she understands well how it works so he can fully rely on her. His puzzled smile spoke for itself. It felt like their life would soon change beyond recognition. Recognition, she said that in the imperial capital where she used to live, she had a servant named Tai. Once she told her, remember these words well if you ever find a person dear to your heart. First, they should truly get to know each other. So she asks, let her speak out. First, the grandest building of this city, Temple of Galactica, Mother Earth, right? He nodded, agreed. She explained the headquarters of the Order of Galatica is a temple in the capital. It was there she grew up as a spiritual priestess of Viscatus. He asked, so is that why she is always called the Black Princess? She nodded and said, black hair and eyes, an extraordinary rarity among people, and when the high priest came upon her near the statue of the goddess, he received a revelation. The goddess said this child is granted her blessing, and they must raise her in purity and innocence precisely because of her. Yet evil will disappear from this land and the place will regain harmony. Eureka said that the heart of the dungeon, which is located in the deepest part, has a limit. As soon as it reaches it will explode, and that explosion will distort the surface with an incredibly concentrated magical essence, and that will be the end. Other continents have already met their demise, turned into dead soil. To save this land, they need to remove the core before it reaches the limit. To help people in this mission, God endowed them with power and the protagonist. Magnus listened intently and one thought spun in his head, perhaps these are the gifts. She recalled her own. He remembered her past and said, because of her status as a priestess, people expected her to become a great adventurer. Since then, she had to accept her fate. The essence of the greatest dungeon in the imperial capital, Endless Dungeon, was almost pushed to the limit. After such a revelation, she could not just sit and do nothing. Not only would her hometown be destroyed, the whole land would perish. People live only once. That you were chosen to save this world is not such a bad fate. He froze in surprise. And she said that if she manages to reach the heart of the dungeon in this city, she will be able to level up, and that meant one thing, another step ahead. A step forward to prevent the end. After meeting him and Maria, she had even more reasons to save this world. He looked with surprise at the faces and thought that, who could have known that the person who loved him was a hero from Maria would be very surprised to hear that this is destined to save the world. He smiled and promised to support her in everything, both as an ordinary person and as a Sherpa. She sincerely thanked him, rejoicing. He smiled happily and said that it was reassuring, and a few days later, Sherpa Guild held a meeting, and MC decided. The shortcut found on the 48th floor, along with the discovery of a new oasis, that was something. It was breaking news that spread like lightning through the city. One of the workers joyfully called the master and announced that the Sherpa map had been updated. Gunji looked at him and praised. He did a great job. From now on, only high-class travelers would submit requests to the expedition. It will definitely grow several times. They should remember this. Ro sat next to him. He decided all those herbs and ore found on the uncovered floor could bring insane profit. He was confident. I am sure Yuika and her squad will reach the lower floor and eliminate the core. Otherwise, the city will definitely destroy everything in the future. The confused Sherpa approached him and asked on what basis he had secured such a large contract with someone like Twilight Sword. He didn't even know they were here at all. And honestly, Sherpa himself once wanted to become a candidate for such a job. Jima came to them and stated that they have a bunch of special requirements for Sherpa, and it turned out he alone meets all the criteria. They called the master and said that at least he can inform them on what date they plan to throw die. The master was burning with desire to see them. He heard that their leader is incredibly beautiful, and there was also a legendary sage in the team. Gunji said that he knows in advance how they will behave, so he was asked not to touch on this topic. She said that their leader does not like noise, so they came incognito. However, their last cube. By the way, this dive caused quite a stir. Is he really sure it's true that the heroes of the East will be able to cleanse there? In their dungeon, the protagonist agreed and said that, compared to all the teams he had to work with, he considers they believed they could handle it. She thoughtfully looked down and said she understands him. She turned around and the Sherpa said that Twilight Sword is still very cool. They have to drink to them. He looked at her and felt anxiety. The anxiety was caused by sudden silence, more precisely, the feeling that something was going to happen. That's why. That's how he felt it from the very moment, and later Morella brought him home. He knocked on the door and threw a hello. She opened it, looked at him evenly and attentively. He approached and asked if he was not late. She handed him something in a bag, then transferred it to her purse, took it out of the pocket and put it back into the purse. He apologized and said that the work had been delayed. It was for her. He asked to distribute to everyone. She took and asked, those were the same candies, right? It wasn't that she didn't like them, she was just worried about the health of her teeth. After that, they went into the house. She sharply said that they needed to hurry, take their seats, and apologized once again. They had already started eating. He thanked her, greeted Dossie, who was sitting at the table eating, then looked at him and asked if it was true that he was hired by the heroes of the East, all of them. Everyone sat at the table and started eating, and MC only nodded and said he was sincerely grateful for it. And at that very moment he finally realized this was the highest paid job of all that he had ever had. With surprise, he said it was incredible, and he had no idea that a monthly dinner was meant to bring them closer. Their blood ties, at least they all pretended as if that were the case. But in reality, it was a monthly report on his finances. Dossie said that he probably had accumulated a pile of money somewhere and smiled slyly. He had enough gold coins. Coins, I think a few dozen, no more. His children thanked for the food and ran to the room, and he began to count. Counting everything on his fingers, he, together with Morel, figured out what was happening. Apparently, he needed to finish eating quickly. He sighed heavily and said, he just estimated in his head how well he was doing for his age. He smiled and said he could only work in peace because they took care of his sister. He laughed and added that no thanks were needed. There are no orphanages in this city. So as long as they are family, their duty is to take care of the children, right? Roy apologized and decided that every time he picks up Marie, he gave them compensation 2 silver coins, and they, as always, didn't say a word about it. They don't take bread, they don't keep accounts. Bread is hard, soup is liquid, but he still can't refuse under any circumstances. They promised to take Mari if he dies in the dungeon, like, as a condition, they will take everything he had. But honestly, he left half of his money with Gunji so that she would give it to his sister when she dies. When she grows up, although he is eccentric, he can be trusted. He called her and pointed a finger at his own face. She said there was a crumb stuck here. She pulled it out, and after that they did milk her. He picked her up in his arms, whispered that she had fallen asleep, so he headed home and they said goodbye. Goodbye, and already outside he said that it seems when they look at him, they only see a big B. A bag of money. She listened silently, and he apologized and admitted all these problems fell on her while he was working. She was sleeping and called her brother with a gentle smile, and he smiled. She thought he was cute. Later, a large crowd of various people gathered at the adventures. The guild secretary of adventures, Sora, said, everyone who wants to get a report on the Twilight Swords dive must fill out forms and submit them. Only after that can you start. Many travelers approached her and began submitting applications to the guild secretary of Sherpas, and who came to help with the work, brought a whole stack of forms, and Sura sincerely thanked her. For him, one of the adventures with a joyful smile. He handed her his form, but at the same time accidentally knocked over the ones she had brought. Surek became furious to the point of madness. She slammed her palms on the table and loudly declared that they must obey orders and not deviate from the procedure. She immediately forbade them from moving forward. Everyone must stay in line and wait for their turn. Anyone who fails this trifle will be permanently blacklisted. The frightened adventurers lined up and loudly agreed. She said, wonderful, let them if they want, and sitting down in her place kept an expression of dissatisfaction on her face. He called her and ordered her to immediately sort out these documents. She caught a sample with her eyes and enthusiastically agreed right away. The protagonist went inside and looked around the crowd of people standing there with surprise. It seemed to him as if he had come specifically to greet Yueka. It seemed he could not find her here at all. He approached the counter, called Anne, and said she was working without a break. She replied through tears in her eyes, there is simply too much work here. Sura irritably called him and asked if he came to apply, and he got confused and broke off mid-sentence. He had just come to meet someone, the leader of the Devil's Wheel adventure party. Sog approached him and said that he seemed to be managing. He had handled it. He put his hand on his shoulder and asked, so he was the guide for the heroes of the East, right? He shouldn't get cocky just because important people hired him after all. He was just an ordinary porter. His team members came closer. Everyone had gathered here, so he, smiling, said that now he had to tell them everything. Everything? What gifts does their group have and how do they fight? The secretaries looked at them with worried expressions. The master of ceremonies called him and sharply asked if he had forgotten all the rules, saying he was stuck somewhere in the middle rows. He definitely wouldn't have revealed such personal information. Especially if it was someone who couldn't keep their mouth shut. That was what made him angry. He grabbed him by the collar and shook him loudly. Right in front of the whole hall, he called him an idiot and demanded, what did he just say? Sura loudly called him and ordered him to stop. At that moment, Yuika flew down from the second floor. He watched as the travelers gathered and tried to understand what had happened to everyone. She failed to break through the crowd and no one even moved. Standing before her, he declared that he was betting on Sag, so now he would also bet on Ro. She was immediately struck by the fact that he was addressed by name, and then the people around them began to incite them to fight. She flared up with anger and began to emit a strong aura that This scared everyone around, and in a serious tone she ordered them to step aside. She rushed forward swiftly. I walked a little further and saw an unfamiliar adventurer who was holding him by the collar. And he raised his fist. She stepped closer and he became anxious because of how threateningly she held him. Sag tensed and because of this asked what she wanted. She said it very seriously with a stone-faced expression. Let him get rid of his dirt. Hands off her, darling. It was as if he was struck because she had just called him that. And she loudly declared he must do it immediately because of this very reason. He was terrified to madness, fell to the ground, and he crawled away from her. She looked at him with fear. A terribly serious expression froze on her face. The main character called her and said that she could calm down, everything was fine with him. The adventurers heard her name and, surprised, asked loudly, isn't that the leader of Team Twilight Sword? Anna looked at her with admiration and said that it was much better that way. He asked, by the way, did she just call him darling? She nodded and replied, Their shame was that they were still a couple. The secretaries were very. It surprised me a lot. You can go up to them and say. She said she apologized for the noise. They were confused and replied that. She said that everything was fine, smiled and added. She still had a lot of things to settle. Things to do, so she apologized and then it was Nook's turn. He was serious and thought deeply. There should be no problems. Anne was shaking with nerves while she talked to her and then, blushing, whispered awkwardly, "That's good." He stepped closer, called her, and announced that these two were his good acquaintances. Surabhoud leaned toward her and added that she apologized for not introducing herself immediately. She gave her name and said that she was the secretary of this guild. Standing nearby, terribly nervous, also introduced herself, explained that she was sent from the Sherpa Guild too. To help, Biku also introduced herself to them and said she was grateful for how they cared for her pet. She also assured them she really appreciated this care. She asked in surprise how long the two of them had been dating, then smiled happily and said it was only a few days. But the confession was even earlier. First he confessed to her Anne and she looked happy. She said it was so romantic the travelers were impressed, and her smile blossomed even happier. Smile, and she replied that it happened twice. Her impression only grew, and she added that he was so stubborn. She was about to ask something else when Sura called her and said she had received care. She was delighted. She turned to her and whispered, eyes shining, "Isn't it wonderful, Evina, to see how happy you are?" He laughed and declared that it was exactly the same. Then he suggested meeting later and having lunch together, and she immediately agreed, glad to go. MC said he regretted how much trouble he caused, although there was so much work. Sura replied that it was. There was no need to apologize. He called and asked if it was time for them to leave. She agreed. They headed to the exit. He waved to the secretaries and said they would see each other again, and Pan, with an overly happy expression on her face, turned and said she invited them to have dinner together. Let them ask about everything properly, she. Now she was momentarily confused, nodded, and added that they needed to return to work as soon as they went outside. He called her by name. She looked at him and replied, "Darling," asking what had happened, and he clarified whether she was sure she should call him that. And she also agreed and said that Tae called her husband that so. And she also called him that. He mulled it over. It turned out she was talking about her maid. Really? Yuika smiled and replied that she was just a little over 40. She was no longer young, had raised a bunch of children, yet she and her husband still loved each other as if they were newlyweds again. Yuika taught her everything about love. For example, lovers must trust each other under any circumstances and fully commit to the relationship if they are truly close, so that their love would have no end. That's what she believed. Honestly, she didn't really listen to those endless talks about love. Still, she never thought she would ever have a beloved person. Now she regretted not listening carefully enough. Looking slightly nervous, he thought, it's good that during conversations about each other they never used the word darling. He had no idea he could say that to her in front of everyone. Everyone? It seemed she grew up in a rather unusual environment. Logical and calm, yes, but when it came to the basics, that is knowledge and experience, she had almost none. She called him darling again and said that now it was time to strengthen their bond. She reached out her hand to him and he wondered, does she want to hold hands? That's exactly how he imagined it, but it turned out differently. Ro called her by name. He called her name and asked what she was doing. Ivica turned to him and replied that it was called clasping hands. He laughed and she asked if he was okay. He replied that everything was fine, it just seemed to him that it was very. Her style was the same. He believed that every couple is unique in its own way, and even despite the fact that despite her embarrassment and mistakes even in the most ordinary things, the main thing was that they felt happiness and satisfaction here. He asked. If they walk step by step it would be easier. She agreed to try. Bari went out. He came out of the restaurant next to them and called him Pops, then said they would see each other later. He had the best meat. He gladly addressed her as young lady and said that yes, that was certainly true. She is supposed to come again. She noticed how they were walking nearby and asked why they were Toj Thuran. She immediately noticed they were holding hands. She screamed loudly from confusion and the thought in her head crumpled. She pondered. She was surprised why they held hands so strangely and walked in sync. She rushed to them, called the princess, asked her to wait, but just at that. The cat at that moment jumped onto her chest and stared at the meat she was holding. She held it, she apologized to the cat, said she was in a hurry and turned sharply. She turned to them and did not notice where they disappeared. This threw her off balance and They continued on foot and Ivka asked if this was the same clinic. The protagonist knocked on the door, agreed and said that he needed to ask the doctor something, it wouldn't take long. He went in, called Dr. Canop, introduced himself and said he was coming in. He moved on, looked nearby next to a pile of empty alcohol bottles. Someone was sleeping and said that he knew she was sleeping. He tried to wake her but she only got a little worried. He was gnawed by the thought how many alcohol bottles there were here, and he couldn't shake it off. He said it was in vain and immediately passed out himself. Then he called her and asked if it was a bit awkward to ask about this, but can she use the dark race drop spell on him. She agreed and stated that it was no problem for her. She used magic. The magic worked. He came to, awkwardly surprised, muttered that his head didn't hurt. The alcohol was way too good. MC asked if he had prepared the potion he requested. Kenobi objected, grabbed the bottle and stubbornly shoved it into his hands, throwing, then at least ask him for a prescription. He just muttered, wait a second, and he will say it right now. He handed him the antidote prescription and warned, if he manages to sell it, don't forget to bring him even more alcohol. He nodded and sincerely thanked him. They left the clinic, and she asked what kind of antidote it was. He replied, an antidote for the poison given to them by the boss from the floor last time. He thought that monster had already been added to the dungeon guide under the name Bomb Vine. He explained that the doctor got a few thorns and he was able to save them. He has the gift of analysis. If there is a source of poison, making an antidote for it is not a problem. With a slightly dissatisfied expression, she said that she would never have thought. He really has an incredible talent. He smiled and replied that it was a bit scary and constantly angry too. He incredibly inflates prices and drinks right at work, but he is a master of magic. Everything he knew about pharmacology he learned from him. He can be trusted. After making a few copies of the antidote, he plans to sell it to the Adventurers Guild. So he was. While he was pondering all this, saving her, Ro asked if it bothered her. She replied with a slightly surprised expression that nodded Alan that impressed her. As befits her beloved, they can raise the stakes. Antidotes with them on their next dive. Great, right? He asked if they would go home after buying groceries. Okay, she agreed. Then she noticed a store, called him over and suggested going inside. He glanced toward the store. He stopped by the store and asked if she wanted to go to the bookstore. She agreed and said she wanted to buy something. Later they returned home. They were met by Mari, to whom S. Welcome back, someone said. They came closer and Ivka took out a photo album explaining that she had brought a gift for her. The gift was addressed to her specifically. She took it, beaming with happiness and sincerely thanked. Satisfied and smiling, Ivka said that she liked it incredibly much. They went into the house and he went to the kitchen to cook dinner. Can you read along with me? She nodded happily and replied that he could count on her. They settled down to read immediately after he finished cooking. After a short pause, they set off to eat. Marie. She, tiredly squinting, shook her head, called her sister, and suggested they go to sleep together. He called her and said it was time to go home. He had held her in his arms all weekend. And Darling said he didn't want her to leave. It confused him, but he still added, she can't stay here. Trust between adventurers and Sherpas is critically important, and if it is betrayed again, she will no longer be on his side. Then others will have no reason to trust him. She still hoped to stay in their house and quietly asked if she could at least stay here until she falls asleep. He apologized and explained, after all, she was already asleep. She led her to bed and wished her good night. They went outside and he offered to escort her home, but she said that it was not. It is not worth it. He cannot leave Marie alone. He agreed and said then they will see each other tomorrow. She turned to. She gave him a look somewhat dissatisfied and he immediately asked, is something wrong? She said that the connections say, it doesn't matter whether it's morning or night when. Then when lovers part, they say goodbye to each other as they should. He looked up and thought, could it be that his words are not enough? So what is needed then? It flashed through his mind. He stepped closer. She asked shyly if she could close her eyes. She did it with the same embarrassment on her face, and he placed his hands on her shoulders and felt she was looking at him too. He had been silent for too long. He kissed her and whispered good night. A few days later. In a few days they set off on their second descent into the dungeon and reached the 32nd floor. Bari poked him and declared that she had seen everything and they were moving so strangely, as if someone was rushing them. One more thing was surprising. They were holding hands right in the very center of the city. She would have believed it was a date. She resisted, called this Yuika the Black Princess, and even added, if she is in a relationship, it could cause problems. What will the temple master say when he finds out about this Yuika from? With a confident smile he asked, let her finish. And then repeated again, loved ones are people for whom only one thing matters, whether the feelings are mutual, right? He and his beloved had already been through this. So there was no doubt they were definitely in love. It shocked them and she sharply and loudly said that. Indeed, there were bad rumors about this boy, but she learned about them from the owner of the alcohol shop. They do remember their requirements for Sherpas, right? They need to have experience and something truly outstanding, and this boy is really a good guide, but the trouble is in their second requirement, their Sherpa. Sherpa must be at least level 5. The boy himself is an ordinary mid-level traveler, level 7 about 4 years ago, however they descended to the 14th floor by a shortcut known only to medium and high-ranking Sherpas. But he deliberately led them to the 13th, the one designated for beginners. There they defeated every monster they could find and he took all the experience and loot that dropped from that floor. That's what, for beginners adventurers usually don't do that, but he did it again and again, so they gave him the nickname Floor Eater. Yuika turned around and asked, does he have any reason at all? Right, he agreed and said that that's exactly how it is. Yuika calmly replied, then there is nothing else left. Then they really could do nothing. Nuku called her and stated that she needed to think about Her position, she is a symbol of trust for Galactica. All adventurers want to be like her. If rumors spread that she is dating someone, it will only strengthen people's doubts. MC listened to him and thought, so it will be. According to him, once someone pretended to be her lover, and because of that, a bunch of gossip articles accumulated. The uproar rose not only among her fans, but also among the church hierarchy, guilds, and young ladies from blue blood families, up to the point that members of Twilight Swords. The squad forbade her from appearing in public. She returned to him and angrily rushed at Darling, saying that these articles were complete fabrications because he was the first man she had ever dated. Nunu jumped up, grabbed him by the head, and said that the problem was no longer about that. Now he asked just in case, is there a likelihood that they will break up? Yuika firmly refused. And then he asked her to promise 3 things. First, she must not do anything in front of strangers, not even this Darling. Secondly, she is not allowed to go on dates with him or sleep with him without his permission. Thirdly, when they are in the dungeon, they must adhere to the usual relationship norms of a traveler and a Sherpa. She was about to object, but he looked at her sternly and called her closer, as if to say it was unknown whether Tai had already told her about it. However, lovers do go on dates. This is, so to speak, a usual matter. You just have to do everything secretly. A little embarrassed, she said that this city is full of people, and the expensive home also has a sister. So where, she asks, are they supposed to flirt? He and Bari grabbed their heads, and she loudly declared that they did not care. Mazakin laughed and said that young love is so beautiful. But just from these words alone, his stomach began to ache. Nuku called him and asked not to mock them. He replied that he had no sense of humor at all. In the capital, he said, he was a priest, he worked on Black Princess, but now they are both travelers, right? Such work is dangerous, you can die at any moment, so isn't it logical to let them do what they want? She angrily lunged at the old man and loudly declared that he was not allowed to say such things when suddenly, the wheel turned in another direction. Before Eureka, he shouted and asked what they should do. She from SL. Slightly displeased expression on her face, she replied. Understood everything, agreed to the terms, but will continue to call him darling as. While they were here, everything remained unchanged. Bari categorically did not like it. Who called her and said that she needed to focus on diving. After that, they could. They continued exploring, and he thought. As last time in 2 days, they reached the 43rd floor. Under her command, now 7 skeletons, 9 orcs, and 5 imps capable of using magical spells. She, with a serious expression on her face, stretched out her hand forward right at the monsters in front of her. And ordered her monsters to shoot ice arrows and others too. They retreated and then reached the 46th floor, fought monsters again and encountered salamanders who had an innate gift of a fire gun, used it. The phantom needle gift managed to catch 6 salamanders and said, excellent, she named them Saro. Saro 16, Nuku called her and said that he felt another monster approaches nearby, they need to manage to dodge. A fluffy giant in fur, the fur covers his entire body. No physical attack against him works. She called sorry and said that they need to test their abilities. They need to reduce everything to a pile of ashes, attack the monster simultaneously. Simultaneously, she said with a satisfied face, as if they have to. They need to focus fire on his flesh. They pressed the giant into the ground with their attacks. And Ivka called him and asked, what is the reason? Is that all he is capable of? He has no fighting spirit, and she burst into loud laughter. Loudly, and Mazakun called that guy and asked if he was okay. His lips were trembling, so they are in love, right? The protagonist thought with a barely noticeable smile that it was unusual for a person to get so excited fighting monsters. She jumped from the cliff she was standing on and reported that Sarah will probably fit well in the upcoming battles. Of course, it's a pity that Nico and Menorin. And this time she is not going with them. She ordered the monsters to line up and cut off, saying the list is not bad. They just had to reach the 48th floor as soon as they got there. Here he decided, this floor has not yet been explored, and a single mistake and everyone could be covered without any doubt. Sherpa can do nothing here anymore. He only has to focus on one thing to create. Map. Now they are at E4S24. The darksmith teleported behind them, laughed and said he knows he found the boy from the girl with braids. MC felt something, turned around, and she immediately noticed. He did, and immediately rushed to ask, is something wrong with you? And even stopped in place, constantly looking back. She looked at him and asked, don't you have the feeling that someone is watching you? She was watching them, objected, and firmly stated that she felt nothing. Whatever happens, they still need to be on alert. She approached 2 orcs and ordered them to cover their backs. Nuku called his lover and declared, ahead 3 huge monsters. The head, she smiled, she will handle them. They stepped into an open space, but there was not a single monster nearby, so she said she saw nothing. She called him and asked if he was sure they were there. He agreed and wrote it down. And Rose added, if so, these monsters might have the gift of illusions or camouflage. He put his backpack on the ground and froze. He crouched as if preparing to jump and began to listen intently. Somewhere above, there was a muffled scratching and rustling, and suddenly a thought clicked in his head. If you look closely, The strangest thing was that the moss glowed only in certain places. He said the monsters hide underground, most likely these are monsters that easily pass through different types of rock. Eureka thought it over and said she knew several monsters that fit this description. They are now on lower floors and each has its own weak spots. First, you need to clearly know exactly what you are dealing with. Noku said that they needed bait, and fortunately among the monsters nearby, there happened to be small and agile salamanders. She nodded, called Saru 6 and ordered, he needs to run across the entire hall. The salamander dashed forward and immediately warned that they would stay here. Wait here until the enemy appears. She was intently watching what was happening around. He noticed something was moving underground and froze, seeing, and said that it was approaching the huge one. Worm emerged from under the ground, and the main hero asked again, is this Ovian, she said, and seriousness froze on her face like a blade. And these monsters are vulnerable to fire. They need to use Sarah's flamethrower, Noku called her, and he said that the salamanders currently cannot move. Against 3 Ovians, they will become their first target. He raised his hand and spoke. He has an idea. Each of them can take a salamander through Bari's sails and air magic. They will move quickly and the salamanders will be able to use this spell without any problems, right? She asked. Then they will become legs for the salamander. Alamander's right, she called to Sarah and grabbed him with her palm, Mazakin. With a look of dissatisfaction, he asked if he would also have to participate in all this. Bari with an indignant face. He loudly declared that of course he must stop using levitation. Ivka called Darling and said, you need to hide here. He agreed and she ordered several monsters to guard. To detain him and so that other monsters would become bait, they moved forward. And she did not. And she loudly announced, the attack will begin as soon as the rest of the Ovians appear. He watched all this from behind. He was sure even among the rarest Ovian monsters there are some of the strongest. He hoped this strategy would work, and that it would not go to waste. No one will get hurt, others were already fighting the monsters and he decided fire cannons are effective. Great, only a matter of time remains. He had just begun to express his opinion but did not manage to finish it. A dark blacksmith flashed behind. He called him the guy with the tails, greeted him, and asked why he had so many things. He made the delivery just like that one, so is there anything else here? He returned, called out with slight surprise, and immediately thought, that one came exactly at that time. And seeing that he was fine, he felt a poignant, touching joy. After these words, now with a joyful face, he said that the man was quite a good person, and it turned out exactly so. He glanced at the monster guarding his path and asked. He understands that his friends downstairs never answer, and this made him beam. Finally, he can talk to someone. Someone during a conversation, you always need feedback, right? He asked, clarifying if it was indeed about feedback. He fell to the ground and added that he actually knows too much about the surface. He knows Lady Pamela at the reception is something out of the realm of fantasy. She is unrealistically beautiful and her figure is just chic. And they say Sleepy's kebabs go well with the same thing called ale. Really? He shuddered at what he heard and immediately slipped into thoughts. Could it be that she already passed away 7 years ago? He decided to join the game and claimed he knew quite a lot, but then realized the information was somewhat outdated. The blacksmith pulled out a dagger and smiling said, this is the dagger of memories. You see the memories of the one you strike with it. He learned many things from those travelers who perished in this dungeon. If the body is fresh, the memories are still clear. He followed them, hoping that all would die. He longs to see their memories. MC coughed quietly, nodded thoughtfully, and asked if this dagger was made in the workshop. The other replied, yes, it was made in the workshop on the 52nd floor. However, he himself is only a courier, so whoever is behind this still drags along the entire production, both the administration and even the fundraising. And among all these people, he is the only one who understands how to best use such things and called it cool. Cool, and thought that it means only one thing. Only 4 darksmiths and the lowest floor is Tyro's done. The dungeon should be on the 52nd and 53rd floors. If there is a workshop on the 52nd, then the lowest floor is almost certainly the 53rd. Right now on the lower floor, except for the boss, there are no monsters. They are all on the 48th floor. It's easier to sort out the past when you know exactly how many floors there are in total. This monster is such a... He becomes too talkative. He wants to track how much information he can extract from here. Meanwhile, people are trying to completely clear the dungeon, while monsters cover them, and one day they will have to fight the darksmiths too. Don't lock yourself up too much and don't lose vigilance. The blacksmith crawled even closer, heard sharp thuds, and asked what was happening there. Darling, Yueka called and said he can come out. Ro rushed to them. The monster crouched behind him and he cheerfully said that everything is fine. Bari saw him and grabbed him. He snatched the weapon from her and loudly announced that this is the very monster. Nuku approached and ordered to wait, otherwise she could have injured him too. She must not forget he can teleport, otherwise they will end up the same as last time. Yueka tightly gripped the sword called Road and asked what it means. He calmly replied that he stumbled upon it just by hiding. It seems his workshop was on the 52nd floor. He sees. He seemed to be quite familiar with the lower levels, at least where the hidden oases are. Kovali threw this out in a confused tone. He assured that of course he knows every corner of this dungeon. Then he turned to Kovali and with a smile asked, what if he asks politely? He will show the path with the fewest monsters. He introduced himself as the guy with braids and asked if he really intended to ask. He happily replied that of course he will lead them all the way to the oasis. He thought and said, only the leader can later give him permission for this since the area is full of monsters. Apanuika circled around Kovali, pointed a weapon at him, and declared that their road to the oasis would be faster if they could. She could use him as bait for the monsters, but Buri cut in. He will be snatched before the first move, so she simply won't have time to use the phantom needle. How to stop his teleportation? She asked. Nuku replied that no demonic energy flows from him, so no enemy sensors trigger on him. The protagonist stepped closer, called him, and asked if he could already feel his energy. He nodded and immediately asked what exactly the protagonist did. He showed them a thing and explained that he hides his demonic energy thanks to this pendant presence isolation. As soon as he said this, they would no longer believe it. Trust him until you feel the energy in him, and as soon as it rolls through your senses, he will immediately give it to the protagonist. He also gave him the boots he used for teleportation. Mazakin extended his hand and asked to hand over those items for evaluation. He took everything and said, yes, the boots really have displacement cast, and the pendant does not raise suspicion. Yuyuka looked at him in surprise and asked, did he tell all this even when no one was controlling him? He agreed and explained that his goal was simply to talk to someone. If they understood him, he could tell them more. She asked if they could use this even without the phantom needle. He replied that the probability was high. But ultimately it was up to them to decide what to do. He nodded in agreement with everything. No hesitation, she thought it all over and said, they would do as Darling said. Bari looked at the princess in surprise and asked if she. Bona was completely sure. She agreed and said they would be allowed to move freely. However, if any problems suddenly arose. She would say, Darling. MC went to the blacksmith and said they had been given permission. This pleased him greatly. It had already happened, but she approached him, called him a monster and said he was celebrating prematurely. They have conditions under which he can continue. Talk to the boy with braids. At first he will follow her orders like a leader, he agreed. He responded to this and she ordered him to call her ma'am. He agreed. Then she said there was also a second thing. He must not attack all party members the same way as the monsters she controls. Thirdly, no lies. If he breaks even one condition, he will not be able to. He will never speak again with the boy with braids. Understood. He straightened up, agreed to the terms, and she said, all right. From now on his name is Skull Mask. Rose stood nearby and smiling said that now they need to head to the oasis. He nodded, pointed in the right direction and confirmed that's where they should go. Mazakin looked at this and said, he is just leading the monster by the nose like that. This boy is incredible. Nuku agreed and added, if he ever became their enemy, it seemed he would be the most terrifying of all they had ever met. Then he decided, traveling with a smart monster that had never happened before and not just with Twilight Sword. In the entire history of travelers, this was a unique case. A skull mask and a monster's desire to talk. Such a monster should not exist, so they had to be cautious. Eureka said they must leave immediately. He has to lead them to the nearest oasis. Politely agreed and showed them the direction. Bari looked away and asked, what about that huge passage? He mentioned the hole in the path. But that's not the path. Alvioni left their tracks everywhere. He tried to pass through somehow but eventually got stuck in circles again. When he finally got outside, he found himself in the same place where he started. If a person gets lost here, most likely they will simply die. The real path is this crevice. Mazuakin snorted with laughter and said to the newcomers, it will seem fatal, but if you don't know about it, it's easy to pass by. The protagonist marked it on the map and he climbed into the crevice and told them to be careful. It was quite tight there. Eureka said she would send Sarah ahead to light up. That way she called Darling and asked what he thought. Would they manage to pass here? He nodded and replied that they could. And he walked along the crack thinking, this is too unusual a structure for a dungeon. If the passage is so tight, then even monsters won't go that way. Then Nuku was called by Lady Black Princess and she said that the orcs were stuck. She called them and ordered them to enter slowly one by one. Skullma. The mask called the boy with braids and said the exit was here. She called him. He got out of the gorge and told the others that he already saw the exit. Then he asked if there was an oasis nearby. He stood next to him, someone said that the oasis was just a little ahead. He was struck by what he saw there and joy spread inside him. Happy Berry nodded joyfully but bumped into his backpack. She looked a little displeased and declared that the luggage was blocking the passage. All because of what she saw, she loudly called the princess and said, it was just a nightmare, she needs to go out and look. Ivica climbed out of the crevice. Travis called Darling and asked directly what had happened here. He called her by name and ordered her to look ahead. Ahead was a cliff. She sharply protested, raising the question of what it all meant. She wanted to add something else, but the worried blacksmith interrupted her and assured that he was not lying. The road continued on there. He noticed a path along the cliff, asked if that was the one. They only nodded in response. Then he said he had been here many times before. Bari asked how he crossed that chasm. He replied, "It's simple boots with movement, so crossing is incredibly easy." MC lifted his boots and declared that now he had them. Now he was furious and promised to give him sandals. Yuika asked if the demons could carry them one by one. Flying demons picked up one orc and Nuku said that's how it should work. The skull mask beamed with joy and asked if she was an angel in the flesh. He smiled, "You're exaggerating, by the way." Where did he get that word angel? She rushed to call two monsters. Orders told them to carry the orcs and immediately assured, the rest will follow them. He glanced aside and thought, you can't get there if you don't know how to fly. He had never seen anything like that, not even on maps. What should we call it, this path? An aerial bridge, maybe it should be marked with a symbol. He looked down and said that below was a whole swarm of blood cockroaches. Bari. He was carried by monsters that rushed and chased after them, and he got scared, so he shouted for them not to dare look there. There she looked too frightened and said she needed to be moved quickly. Yuyuko was brought to them. She called her and asked how she was feeling. They had not moved everyone yet, but they had to keep going. She called her and they said 5 flying monsters, and after they moved the monsters one by one, let them follow them. They moved on and saw many. He hinted at many different passages and explained, they need the second cave on the right. Ro asked, are these really all different paths? If having received a positive response, he began to note everything on the map and thought, with such a number of passages, it will be very difficult for the next group of travelers even with a map. Skull Mask moved on and said that they needed to go there. There he thanked him and immediately added that he had helped them a lot. He laughed and caught himself thinking, it looks like he is a special person. He thanked for the compliment and with joy on his face, asked if he could keep these sandals. He agreed, smiled, and said that let it be a sign of gratitude and proof of truth. As a confirmation of their friendship, Yuika coughed to attract attention and said they needed to go down and rest. He suggested brewing tea. She nodded, then thanked him again. After that he brewed tea, brought it to the others and said, he said he was switching to fruit food and as a snack too. It was a bit sour but still incredibly very tasty. He approached the rest of the team and treated them as well. And they thanked him for it. Then he turned to Skull Mask and said that he already had this for him too. Skull Mask was beaming and said that he really was a very good person. He took it in his hands, looked at the dried fruits with delight and asked, so does this mean that people eat them? He left. He was shaken with surprise. It was something incredible in taste. The main character just laughed and said that one should eat more slowly. Well, something like that. So that no one chokes. Bari noticed how the princess frowned displeased and asked what happened. Yuika answered with a serious face that they must stick to the plan. She called the whole team and asked if they could come here. He immediately agreed. Then she called Skull Mask and ordered him to stay there and sit quietly. When everyone gathered around her, she addressed Darling. It could be safely assumed that the lowest floor of the dungeon is the 53rd, right? He agreed and said that most likely yes. She moved closer and informed, now they are on the 48th floor and the next target is the 50th. Basement? As soon as they found the bypass, they could break out to the surface again. Bari looked at them enviously and asked how much longer they would have to drag along with this monster. She turned to him and replied, they were incredibly lucky, did not get lost and managed to take the bypass. Bari would prefer if she led them all the way to the end of the route. Nuku covered his face with his hand, grimacing with displeasure, and Mazukin was chewing fruit and spat out that it seems a bittersweet love triangle is unfolding here. He called Nuku and politely asked him not to chatter unnecessarily. Yuika called Darling and asked if he could inquire about the next step. MC agreed and said that he, confused, he decided that he finally understood how to behave with him. By the way, he wanted to ask him about monsters. He was sure that they would come across ones that were not yet in the monster guide. And there was also the possibility that they would get the floor boss. Nuku asked in surprise if he wanted to talk with him about bosses too. He smiled and replied that he understood. It really could be dangerous, so he would try to ask carefully so that he wouldn't suspect anything. She turned to him and looked anxiously. Of course, it was pleasant, but wasn't he standing too close? Even if he acted with good intentions, he behaved with him too friendly. He must remember one thing, he is a monster and an enemy for some reason. Her heart tightened from that closeness. He looked a little confused and said that he understood her. Bari was wildly upset. For the first time she realized that the princess was jealous and she called her. Mazukin sipped tea and declared that this could be considered advice from the leader. Isn't it laughable incredible? Eureka stood up and said that they had rested well, they could continue. She called Skalmaskin and he replied, they needed to go down even further, let him show the shortest path. He agreed and asked if there would be even tastier food. Ro looked at him through a smile and said that maybe it would be so. He agreed and said, so let's hurry. He led them to the slope, laughed and he said that being with adventurers is pure pleasure. He walked alongside, looked around, and asked if he was not wandering with his comrades. The dark smiths, he did not know enough, so he would just make a sketch. The blacksmith contradicted what he said earlier and stated that he invited. But no one responded. He looked at him and asked, "By the way, he speaks their language perfectly, but he has no one to talk to." Is that true? The local monsters did not suit him either. He agreed and said they do not match, but one of them sang and even cast a spell. So they need to understand the language. Therefore, he constantly tries to talk to them. An obsessive thought about singing, they are probably not lower level. Level monsters because they can put meaning into words. Maybe they are also floor bosses. He looked around, you noticed this, and nodded to him. He said that he worries about his friends. What class are they? Skullmask stepped forward and replied that he does not know at all. All the monster names he remembered came to him from other people's memories, people who died in the dungeon. He stepped into something liquid and Nuku was called by Lady Black Princess. The monster had already appeared behind them. She asked for only one. For the lower floors, this is an extremely rare case. The protagonist heard the rumble of a rolling boulder and instantly realized. Only the monster that came alone appears on the floor. He sharply turned to them and thundered, "This is a killing ball. If it touches you, it will simply destroy you." Note, the killing ball rolls, fills the entire dungeon corridor and destroys everything in its path. They covered everything that happened on the road. Rolling forward at full speed, Skull Mask quickly asked, "So what he stepped on earlier and crushed that monster they had just been talking about?" He noticed that the passage split in different directions and sternly told everyone, "We need to go right." The blacksmith was shocked by this and loudly declared that the passage was wider there. The ball would fit there without any problems. He said firmly and confidently, "Everything will be fine." They had to quickly run into this passage, and they succeeded. The ball was rolling behind, and the wheel of the process had already started turning. Behind them it turned left. Bari noticed this and asked, "But why did it turn there?" He said there were messages about people's deaths, and he recalled the words of one of the oldest guides. The group managed to survive, they just chose the wider passage. Skull Mask buzzed excitedly, flying up to him and blurted out, "He knows so much." Even he, a monster, did not suspect. But this was exactly what was expected from his friend. Ivica laughed, flashing a satisfied smile, and teased, "Isn't he incredible? After all, he is F. She is her dear one." Bari was stunned by what happened and wondered if she was competing with Ammon. Monster, a giant monster, crawled past them, a sign that the carnival on the unexplored floor had silently already been set in motion. F. She followed them. Later she called him and said that the enemy was. The moment was approaching. Both of them needed to hide somewhere. He nodded and agreed. They headed to where there was more. Mazakin and MC asked if he had ever seen them fight. Instead, they received a denial. He said it was better for him to close his eyes after all, for a monster like him. It could have been very shocking. The slime man crawled towards them. Their special ability is the physical endurance of this species. Nuku looked at the giant monster and muttered that he felt the presence of Seven. She was standing very close. A little further he said, "It is one and the same." They merged into one whole. Seven called 5 of the Saris and ordered them to climb the hill. The slime mass twitched and struck with flames from all sides. Slime monsters hold fire only until it crumbles into dust. He sharply turned and loudly warned that 3 more monsters were sneaking from the opposite side. 7 called all the orcs and ordered them to cover from the rear. 3 minotaurs emerged from the darkness. 7 laughed and said that it was wonderful. That's exactly what they needed. It was necessary to strike exactly at what stood ahead. She cut through the group of skeletons to attack the monsters from the flank, called Bari, and said she should use magic to immobilize the slime man. She called 2 flying monsters and ordered them to obey her team. To 2 more monsters, she gave the order to obey Nuku's commands and declared that he must provide support to the orcs and skeletons. He agreed, and with a confident smile she drew a sword and said that they needed to put an end to the carnival. At that moment, the frightened Skull Mask turned to the boy with. He had pigtails and asked if he could be pushed in the shoulder. When he could open his. He opened his eyes. Something pushed him in the shoulder and he immediately asked if this was really the end. Ready, and he was able to open his eyes. He got even more scared when he saw that it was the head of an orc and loudly declared that this was what hit him. He fainted. Mazakun confirmed this and Rose said that it was Ev. Even better for him just like that. He took a notebook and began to think about how to describe the fight and wrote down. Thanks to the fire of the salamander, the slugs were cut apart, and Bari with the help of an imp immobilized one of them. All 7 found themselves trapped by the phantom needle. The minotaurs still held formation, but the slow slime. Lime suddenly filled with energy, Yuika shouted from the Po. Then Puyo counted from 1 to 7 and ordered them to hold on. She has to hold the minotaur its tentacles. The slimes immediately obeyed her. She dived inside and grabbed the minotaur. She rushed straight at them. She used the skill Phantom Needle, and then he said that all monsters have to line up. She used the heal monster spell on them, and eventually she had 3 salamanders, 7 slimes, and 3 minotaurs. And 1 imp under her control. She looked at them with. He looked intently and said that the attack power is weak. She suggested they move on and called Darla. And he asked what was wrong with Skull Mask. He held it with one hand and said he was fainting, asking for a moment to recover, and offered them a snack. As soon as they heard this, he immediately came to his senses. He stood up and happily said that he also wanted to eat. The protagonist smiled and replied that first they would reach the oasis at 49th floor. Okay. Nuku glanced at this with a puzzled expression and thought that it looks as if he is holding him on a short leash. Later they set up camp near the oasis, and while resting and treating their wounds they managed to extract the garrison and one skeleton knight with the gift of explosion. After that they finally reached the finish point of the descent to the 50th floor. He went ahead and thought that the level of Twilight Sword Squad was on the 12th. And the recommended level for this place is 16. Although they conserve their strength, fatigue quickly builds up. It seems they should prepare something. On the next pass something light, but you still need to properly prepare your health and mind. Zilly the Skull Mask exclaimed with slight surprise, and it touched him. What happened? Did they get lost? He waved it off and said that he seemed to remember this place. When he came to visit his friend, he often teleported to the nearest place. He just didn't notice at first because he came here too abruptly. This caught Eweek's attention, so MC asked, "Does that mean his friend is nearby?" He replied, "That happens most often but not always. He is rather gloomy but gigantic, so he will be easy to notice, and their faces are somewhat similar." He was a little confused and decided that this was in no way like what he already knew about his own face. The face was still covered by a mask that remained invisible. They entered a large empty cave. Cave and Skull Mask said that he was ultimately not in the right place. Usually he talks to him right here. He looked around and thought that it was terribly dark here. "It is dark here." They heard the clatter of horse hooves and it scared him so much that he shouted loudly, "So they will be here soon. What should they do?" His own reaction surprised him, so he asked, "They are friends, aren't they?" He cut off sharply and declared, "They are old enemies. Once they tore out and ate his hair. And for him this hair is incredibly precious. He pulled it from dead peeplethos he found in the dungeon. And he attached it here on hair at a time. It took too much time. He does not want to go through that again." He started to run away, said goodbye to Theme, and Ro asked to wait. He said he forgot. He lost his boot, so everything is decided. He said he had fun, so he might leave it, and after all, it is cursed. Someday they will meet again, but next time they might face each other as enemies. After all, monsters exist to protect the dungeon. Yuika noticed that Skull Mask ran away and asked Nuku how many enemies were coming here. He answered, 13. All CSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSS form a defense hold tight. Defensive formation shoulder to shoulder. The slimes closed into a wall, and she called Minoran again to hold the line and not break apart. Let them prepare their spear slit the geese cover their backs. Nisukin Sarah must protect her beloved child. And Mazukin the thunder of hooves grew louder and rolled forward. And then they heard the sharp, loud scream of those monsters. The protagonists saw the monsters and said that they were by. If they hit you with their horns, the wound will fester and not let go until they die. She died with a firm expression on her face. She rushed to Bio and sharply called him. He ordered her to block their way, and the monsters crashed into the slugs. And they immediately began to devour them, while Ivico calmly approached closer. Getting a little closer, he said that in defense they are much more useful than she expected. She so easily caught a whole pack of monsters and used phantom muti. He aimed at them with needle skill and without looking away, announced that his name was Yagi-1. He continued to use this skill against the monsters and gave them names different ones, with different titles. After this, she ordered them to line up and Barry called her. And asked if they looked more like horses. Nuku called the mistress and said that there are 6 enemies ahead. They looked back and MC said that these were skeletons but they had neither armor nor weapons. She smiled and said that it was timely so they could try Yagi right on them. She ordered them to attack the skeletons and they handled it without any difficulty. He called her again and warned about 6 more monsters. He was a little surprised that. He looked and in a moment decided everything. These were skeletons again. There were many of them. Moreover, without any weapons. Is this their territory or something like that? A few more times and 6 skeletons appeared to them. She defeated them with the help of her monsters. Yuiko was a little confused and asked, "What is this?" as if they were just going to their death. Death in the air above Ya, a magical circle flicked. Yagi, which immediately caught their attention. This magical circle tore the dark energy in half. The circling, she loudly snapped the command, "Booyah." Leo immediately dropped into a defensive stance. Dances, they all suddenly heard a very loud noise. A rumble from which they reflexively covered their ears. Rue sharply and surprisedly jumped up. "What is this sound?" she called out loudly. He ran to Yagi and ordered them to flee from their end, just as the dark magic entered. The energy disappeared, and Rue immediately noticed this with surprise. Bari saw that Yagi had disappeared, and a moment later something else happened. Something rose from above. Rue raised a finger and asked. And he asked to look at it, and everyone felt how it pressed and squeezed them so much that it took their breath away. They were squeezing hearts, and those completely took away common sense. As if heads refused to think, and then a huge skeleton appeared. It emerged next to them, and uttering the spell of the gates to the underworld secured its arrival. He looked at it and decided there was only one feeling fear. It was the king of the dead, born in despair. Isn't that a top rank? Undead monster top rank, Mazakin was at the F level. He became the first to overcome his fear and immediately cast a spell. The Moonblade spell, it was used by the boss of the 50th floor. He uttered a counterspell against the bell and repelled its attack, glanced at it. With a serious expression, he assured, this means he is capable of reflecting his own thoughts. Reflect magical attacks. His spell burst from its place like a whirlwind and flew into. I lay down, such a strike became the signal the battle begins. They quickly recovered, grabbed their weapons, and immediately took up prepared positions to continue the fight. Shifted into combat stances. With a loud shout, Ivica declared that Minoran 1 and Minoran 2 must. The skeletons need to be cleared out, and the last one kept in reserve. Booyah 1 must break through the darkness by 7 all the way to the king. The protagonist pulled something from the backpack and shouted Mazikun at the top of his lungs. He said it was time to use these mana potions. He grabbed them, took them in his hands, and attached them to his. He pulled out a belt, barely smiled, and said that it seemed he would have to take part in F. Eventually, he became curious. He called Black Princess and declared that he would try to attack them with his magic. And asked to borrow support from the Minotaurs. She agreed and said that G from 1 up to 4 must remain in reserve and wait there. Darling must stay behind. He agreed and asked everyone to be careful. She agreed, rushed forward. He rushed forward and named Nuka, Barry, and Nisuk in her honor. They rushed past the Minotaurs who were. We fought skeletons, rushed forward to the boss, and he opened the gate. Read again gate to the underworld spell and summon the skeletons again. She noticed this and called Nisagate. So he ordered her to deal with them. Their joint efforts, and they defeated that group. A pack of skeletons, and they were breaking through the barriers again. The king of the dead clapped his hands and cast the spell Funeral Prayer. He released a powerful sound wave and it engulfed them instantly. They covered their ears with their hands and cannot move. The boss began to apply drains. Spell Mazakin was incredibly worried about this. He loudly declared that this is really very bad. It was an attack directly on the soul. If it had hit them, the soul would have died before anything else. They have to dodge, all barely managed to avert this attack. The attack dissipates. The dark energy released by the monster disappears. Disappeared, Yuhiko loudly called Barry, and said that the enemy was already behind her. It struck her, but she immediately rushed into an attack with a dagger but skell. The skeleton stopped the blow with its teeth and grabbed her by the head. She immediately called Sarah and gave an order. To help her, Salamander ran up to her and he rushed to her and incinerated the monster with flame. We thanked the princess and said that she would use the psalm. Alamander as before with Ovians She agreed and ordered them to obey her commands. She turned around and they loudly proclaimed, they need to destroy one of the king's hands and only that. All their work boils down to a single attack. Everyone immediately nodded and MS glanced and decided, because of the funeral prayer and wilting, everything will fail. The combination of 2 attacks is too risky. If only they didn't strike from afar. They could be covered by a wave that wiped out all the Bichorns. Even if they managed to sneak up to him, he is protected by a whole batch of skeletons he summons. If they could find even a single gap in him in his. With a face resembling an unshakable verdict, Nuku rushed into the attack, attaching his squire to the fight and used the skill throw. The king of the dead cast the Cotter Bell spell and noticing this, froze with a surprised expression, as if thinking, so not only magic can be reflected. In the head one logic, and the body also a rapid series of strikes. Yuyuka loudly said that maybe he just can't manage to block everything in a row. At the same time, they need to press relentlessly so that there is no pause at all. Agreed, he prepared to throw a shooting technique and Bari flew up behind the boss. Loudly commanded the salamander, immediately prepare the fire cannons for use. As soon as the order sounded, the plan immediately converged into a single strike. They simultaneously rushed into attack from different sides. He had no time left and the boss did not let him use the spell. The boss fiercely growled in pain. In pain, she screamed and called Nisagate, ordering him to use it. Squeeze the explosion in your hand right now. But the boss called him his own and ordered obedience. Obey, he fell to his knees unable to move and she called to him from. He looked confused and asked what was wrong with him. We need to get up and attack the king. After all, he threw his sword. He stuck the sword into the ground and grabbed her by the throat, and she grabbed him the same way. She did not wait. Everyone was deeply concerned. It disturbed her, so she called him and asked. She asked to be released and asked. He was asked why he stopped obeying. It embarrassed him and he wondered, could the king? She could actually command the skeleton knights. 2. She called Bio 7 and gave the order. They needed to catch him. The disgusting sludge quickly crawled to him. He was caught and he, without hesitation, let her go. She only exhaled when what had to happen happened and said that they lost part of their combat power, but unfortunately, it was inevitable. From the first to the sixth take, she gathered Buyo and said that they must continue. Hinui advances through the darkness, paralyzing the king with tentacles. He cast the gate spell to break into the underworld. World, she muttered, squeezing the intonation with displeasure, and added that he called them even more. There were countless skeletons, no end or edge to them. The king of the dead is about to cast a spell. Drain and Bari rushed forward to pounce on him, shouting salamander. Attack with magic, but the boss himself hits with magic. He hit her with his tail and with incredible force threw her to the ground. It gnawed at her from the inside and she finally called. He called the monsters and ordered them to take care of the skeletons. He continued to summon skeletons and Madzakun created them. He unfolded a magic circle right under this monster and used it. Spell of high explosive cannon. He released an extraordinarily powerful burst of energy. When the dust settled, he threw out the phrase with surprise. The prize he managed to avoid. He is really quite clever. For his size, isn't it so? In any case, it seems he still did. He did not come out of there unscathed. Limus and King's spine were a bit broken, so he used the funeral prayer spell. She became worried and loudly warned the others about another threat. Another wave was approaching. The protagonist watched from the side and did not intervene. And then he realized the fight was prolonged. Only after that did the idea come to him. Their usual tactics would not work here. Eriko loudly declared that they needed to get rid of him. First with hand movements, she rushed at the skeletons that were already pulling closer to them. They shouted science and he immediately read her intention and promised he would not let him. He managed to cast only one spell and Bari jumped out after him and dived into the shadow. And behind it was loudly announced again that he had been drawn. She ordered to draw magical circles and only then. I handed the salamander so that Matt would use it. Magic and he immediately did so. She struck with a spell but the limousine still arrived. The king was still using the spell Swamp of Darkness. A magical circle flared up under her feet. Her skeletons and she immediately noticed this and said that they needed to run away from the magical circle. They all scattered but one of them did not make it. And instantly he was pulled under the spell. MC notices this. He felt it and he was dragged into the mud. She calmly observed it all and decided that it was wonderful. All three succeeded. The boss used a spell through the downpour and she suddenly shouted at G4 and gave an order. Tell him to use the blizzard spell to stop him. He was lucky the skeleton did so and he succeeded, and even with the bear. Bari held the salamander from a distance until it reached the point she needed. Her hands with which she performed magic. The king of the dead dodged, not letting the blow touch him. This attack and Yuika saw it, so she immediately thought, can he predict their attacks in advance? She called out towards G4 and sharply ordered, continue. He ordered him to use that spell again. She also called her and gave the order to use the spell Fire Cannon. The monster dived aside again, dodging the strike. And she smiled as if to say that was good. It was wonderful, everything happened exactly as she had planned. The end. Someone grabbed the sharp edge of the boss's mantle, and it immediately shrank like a rag. Slime slid nearby and it confused her. She was surprised by what happened and said she understood everything, and he was very. So she forced him to come closer very slowly. She loudly called Mazakin and he immediately understood everything. Use the spell Moonblade, tell the monster what are you. Use the counterbail complex to reflect the spell. But he used the duplicate skill and launched it. Another spell. This is a gift that allows. This gives you the ability to copy any spell as soon as it is cast. He used it but it cost twice as much mana. His strike hit and he managed to cut off two monsters. They rejoiced because exactly what they were waiting for happened. And he drank a mana potion and turned to him only two. Took only two hands, right? No problem. Ro was watching from cover. He covered it and immediately realized, in such a short time, using counterbell twice won't work. He understood this and immediately took advantage of the moment. Now his advantage hunted in the twilight. From the side shone the light sword, and the slime man had the gift of physical resistance, so his grip was almost impossible to weaken. Iveka loudly ordered Menoran to move forward and said to continue the offensive. He aimed from afar with his gaze and thought that it was exactly that. But it did not look like a direct attack. She loudly called G1 and 3 and gave the order, protect her. She, together with Nuku, hid behind the monsters and survived the attack. Attack only when you hit, with such a serious face. She ordered him to take the sledgehammer and said that they must use it as a shield. It's good that Menoran 3 was not injured. Now he has to destroy the right hands of this monster. The Minotaur lunged at his side and he clapped his hands. I intercepted his wrist, tied his hands and cast the burial prayer spell. The magical energy struck the monster, broke the moment of oppressive silence, and exploded with a blow. There were a few wounds left on his body, one more moment and they began to darken. He lunged forward and raised the axe for a swing. But the barefoot man was struck by the curse of the drainpipe and hit himself in the head. Ivka shouted loudly and ordered him to attack his right hand. Sparks flare up in the eyes, and the whole body tensed the muscles for the final attack. The Minotaur cut off his own hand. It seems the hand, but it snatched it above the head. She snatched it and tore it away. Bari froze in surprise. He said that the Minotaur is dead. He said. Ivka calmly nodded and replied that it is a great loss, but they will have to take another hand. The protagonist stared intently at it, keeping a serious face. And she decided, her monsters are fearless no matter how wildly the enemies rage in attacks. They could not disobey and retreat, so they continued to press. The King of the Dead used the gate. The oath gate to the underground world worked. The creature began to regrow its arm. It screamed loudly and called out. He called G4 and ordered to freeze that hand. He unquestioningly obeyed. And Mazakin used the spell of Earth and Fortress. He created a grate. The ice cliff was behind his back, so he could not escape. Nuku caught the moment, a perfect chance for an attack. He used his throwing skill to hit exactly his hand. One of them was at the very edge. With a crash, Bari snatched the daggers and lunged at this monster. Monster seems to have felt the threat promised to tear this thing apart. She activated the gift of the edge. The blade can cut everything it touches. She touched and cut off the fourth hand, mutilating the mother. Monster cast the spell Swamp of Darkness. He drew a magic circle under Yuika, and she suddenly jumped back. Ludovico, without wasting a second, ordered GI4 to run away. GI4 was running away from there, but he didn't make it. And he was engulfed by black magical energy. Nike, looking at the monster, loudly called the mistress. And he said, slime underwater drain. MC, did you notice that? He decided that almost all the monsters had already fallen. Yuika used the jump skill and dashed upward at a wildly high speed. This is a gift that temporarily boosts strength and activates precisely in this battle. Everything is decided by a single fraction of a second. Will his sword strike in time? Attack first or the king's hand, however at that moment on. In the last second, a smile flashed across her face. She thrust the sword into the eye socket of the King of the Dead. As soon as he moved to use magic, Phantom Needle already struck, sharply, without any warnings. The gift needle killed him on the spot. She drew the sword and declared that from now on his name is. This is Litz, landed on the ground and coldly announced that the ruler of the Shadow Kingdom must obey her. Nuku said that this is the boss from the 50th floor. And now she finally got him in the photo. Everything looks. It looked terrible. Yuika agreed and said that for him they overall lost 26 monsters. Only Niske, Buyo and Sarah remained, and she decided to raise their numbers. First they need to rest, she will put them on guard. And Darling also has to prepare the potion. He agreed, lowered his gaze and looked outside. She asked, when does the floor move? Everyone stared in surprise and she loudly added, so are they enemies again? Then Bari asked with surprise why the floor is shaking so much. Rose replied that it seems the floor is changing. An anomaly that happens once every few years. Under their feet the floor suddenly began to collapse. And the worried Evrika loudly declared that she would separate them. They need to stick to each other as closely as possible. He and Bari had already started falling down. And she called the princess with anxiety. He had already stretched out to call her and she instantly felt it, she exclaimed. He shouted at them so loudly that he was already about to use the gift and promised that he would save them. And the ground between them jumped up by 7 steps. Separate them and they noticed that the past is already. The passage was narrowing and she was terribly afraid of what would happen next. He did not remain silent about it and called too. At the same time, she suddenly fainted, and almost immediately thought she is seeing the same dream again. In difficult times, her thoughts always reach out to the past team, to the one that was. She was destroyed, and the one who saved her in that difficult moment is named Yuika. If they leave the labyrinths as they are, then all the light will be infected by magic and will fall. So to save it, they will have to clear all the dungeons. When she spoke about this absurd plan, her eyes flashed brighter than anyone else's. In this world, she wanted her gaze to shine just as dazzlingly. She wanted to be close, stay with her longer than anyone else, and help her more than anyone else. The princess was the only and first person who gave her hope. That was her light. She came to her senses. Protagonist called her and said. She finally opened her eyes and immediately covered them with her palm. He jerked his hands and loudly ordered, turn off this lamp right now. She sharply sat down and asked again if he wanted to burn here or something like that. He replied that he had already looked around a bit. It looks like this passage was formed due to a collapse and nothing extra is twisted. It stretches straight without branches and arenas. There are no monsters nearby yet. She tied her hair. And keeping a serious face, he said that they need to find the princess, must be somewhere very close. He looked at her and said, going somewhere without thinking is dangerous. She was already about to object. And he said that she needed to think about how exactly they were separated. Eureka and the rest most likely stuck together. The skeleton knight was standing nearby, but he was. He did nothing, and that was proof that her phantom needle still worked. Bari T. Harry paused at the thought and admitted that he was probably right after all. He said this with a barely noticeable smile. As long as Nook was nearby, they could move much more safely than they ever could without him. So he suggested to trust them and just wait here. He handed her a potion for recovery and he asked her to drink, and then he himself went straight to the monster standing nearby. I said that the skeleton knight had lost his left hand and shield, but was still standing. He drew his sword, she began to drink the potion and threw at him, carefree. She trembled as soon as she heard everything. She caught a loud sound and immediately started coughing. She turned that way, already wanting to ask something. But he held the sword in his hands and said what he thought. This sword might come in handy. Power. Strength requirement 35 points to hold it with both hands. He hopes it is not cursed. He thrust the sword into the rock and it shook loudly. What does it do? Asked MS. He had heard rumors that after collapses, the walls and floor are too soft, way too much. Until you use them, everything crumbles too easily. However, when it hardens, this span will come in handy if something goes wrong. He invited her to sit, explained that they needed to discuss tactics and added, even if only temporarily they are on the same side. And if monsters appear, then they will have to fight, so it's time to talk about stats and gifts. He is a level 7 traveler and a heavy warrior. His gift is stamina regeneration. 4th class, she was surprised and said that despite everything the highest class is the 3rd. Relying on travelers and the Galactica Guild Church, he agreed and said. He asked to keep it secret because he had never told anyone about it before. She knows about the choice between a gift and stats during leveling up except for level 1 when he received stamina regeneration. He kept increasing his strength, so now he has 31 strength points. Judging by this alone, he can quite compete with high-level adventurers. She slapped herself in the face with disgust and thought he was a real idiot. She needed to pull herself together. She is level 11, he called. He called her and said that she also needed to talk about her abilities. All this is for survival and reunion with Yuika, she. Suddenly, with a gloomy expression and hesitation, he said, there is nothing to be done anymore. About this, her story, he said, if 5 of them run into monsters together, they cannot win. But he had a plan on how to pull it off. He asked her to cast Wind Dance on his hands. It's supportive magic that instantly boosts strength, right? If she really can. She will strengthen his hand send, then her power will be enough for him to hold this broadsword. Bari asked, he has 31 strength points and the requirement for broadsword is 35, isn't it? If he doesn't make it to the end, he will get tired almost immediately. She remembered his gift, and he declared that he would take on the role in the tank so she needed to stay behind him and strike at the moment she notices the right opportunity. He laid his life on her, he trusted her and she was impressed, agreed. And he read it, clarified, so let it be so. It works both ways, right? They have already been notified. It seems she caught something again, then carefully asked, it takes a little time, right? This is the Minotaur. Ro looked at the beast and sharply asked, is it only me or did he really look angry? He gripped the sword even tighter in his hands. When the monster roared loudly, it lunged straight at them and swinging its axe struck. It dealt an extraordinarily strong blow with its weapon. She was thrown backward by this powerful, strong gusts of wind. She sat down abruptly and decided that it was only a shock front. She knew it could not be. Are they even capable of standing against such a monster? As soon as the dust settled, she looked and saw he was holding. He held back the monster's attack with a sword. This confused her and she asked uncertainly, did. So he stood against the Minotaur. Using colossal strength, he did not let go of the monster, continuously extinguishing blows, blocking them one after another. Pinching the monster's attack, he sharply turned around and burst out with a loud shout, Buri. She immediately regained consciousness, jumped to the Minotaur and use an again gift of edge. She stabbed the dagger into the Minotaur's hand and, with a tense look, she wondered if that was all the strength the strike had. How strong were his muscles? The protagonist called her and said she had managed well, and for her to attack in the same spot, she agreed, and he continued to fend off all the Minotaur's attacks. She waited for the right moment and dashed forward to the monster and again dashed into attack with the dagger. Relying on her gift, she immediately dashed aside and thought wonderful this time the cuts were deeper. She flinched. He jumped after them and their cooperation grew stronger along with him. With each moment, the clash with the Minotaur increasingly turned into a war of attrition. The monster roared furiously with extraordinary loudness, and Bari said that it seemed to have gone crazy. The Minotaur began to attack more actively with his. He chopped with an axe, blocked the strike and jerked it sharply towards himself. Warned her about the danger, the force was too great to simply endure. He struck hard once more, and the blade of his sword cuts forward without hesitation. Everything around began to crack. She got scared and rushed to him. She spoke to him and immediately realized he needed help. She tried to support him. Tried to attack her in vain, but the monster is already here. The monster pushed her away with his muscles, then blocked the path, not letting her out of the roads. All the Minotaur's attacks, and she, with surprise on her face, wondered how much the dance of the wind had strengthened him. His strength, how is he still standing? How did he manage to hold on to his support? On his feet, she remembered his words and dashed. He rushed towards the monster and thought that this guy believed in her and her strength. Contracted in focused silence with a stone expression on her face, she struck. She plunged into the attack with daggers and still managed to hit. From the deep wound, the monster felt a hellish, terrible pain. With a sweep of his hand, he threw it away, as if with one motion he waved it towards her. Throwing off his hand, he pressed the weapon into him again. It seemed to him that he was already somewhere on the edge. He barely managed to continue the attack with the axe, but because of the wounds he had already received, he stopped and fell to the ground. She was confused. He refused, and they asked him if the Minotaur's strength was gone. Her strength was exhausted. She sighed with relief when she finally realized what had happened and instantly blossomed with a joyful smile. She said, "It worked." They won, survived the fight with the Minotaur, and after that clash he was also exhausted. He lowered the sword and blood ran down his hands. She immediately noticed this and with worry in her eyes loudly asked, "Is this the opposite effect? Now she will heal him." MC with a calm smile called her and asked if she was okay. "Okay," she agreed, quickly approached his backpack and said that he just needed to sit down. "Let him sit and I'll get you a potion," she said. He thanked her and lay down. He fell to the ground and said how glad he was that their plan still worked. It seemed to him as if such torments of fatigue had overwhelmed him, as if he had never had the 4th level of endurance recovery. Bari turned back, called him, and said she was pulling everything she could find. She gave him a healing potion, asked him to drink it. He obediently agreed and sincerely thanked her. She crept up from behind and whispered that now the wounds need to be smeared with healing ointment, so he should take off the cloak. When she finally took off the cloak, she began to unfasten it, but it turned out she couldn't manage. "I didn't expect it to be so heavy," he exclaimed loudly. "What kind of cape is this? Even armor would be lighter." "Is it made of iron?" He objected and immediately explained. "The item is made of heavy silver, the kind that falls from a rare monster. Silver plate, its silver resists all types of magical attacks, and at the same time is many times heavier than any other metal and cannot be processed by any method. That's why it's called not an item but a complete disappointment." She opened the jar of ointment with a confused face and asked, "Well, someone had to sew this cloak for him, right?" Ro agreed and explained that he melted everything into plates, placed them on a wooden base, and hammered them out. He simply transforms everything into the needed shape. She asked why he needed this if there are other types of armor. He smiled and replied that weight hardly bothers him, and he decided it would be funnier that way. She froze in shock and he laughed. And she said that silver plates mostly lived on the 13th floor. It was allocated for new travelers. She asked, so that's why they started calling it the Floor Devourer. He no longer remembered and said that the fact that the Adventurers Guild gave him the task to exterminate the owlbear made him move down to the 13th floor. He recalled the past and decided, owlbear is the floor boss that roams the dungeon corridors. It took the lives of many adventurers as soon as they set out on their path, but as soon as it was killed it respawned in half a month. Once it was an ordinary average, again and again tracking the owlbear. 3 years passed and finally he found the respawn point. Blocking one of the main arteries, he redirected the flow of magical elements and erased the monster once and for all. Thus, the 13th floor, feared as the floor of death, opened up to novice adventurers. She stopped in surprise, remembering what had happened earlier, and asked if he had a bad reputation in the bar. He gave a careless smile and said that while tracking the owlbear, he accidentally came across silver discs, so he decided to hunt for them himself, and could explain why they thought he had taken them. He stated that all the floors belong only to him. She, blinking confusedly, asked, "What about telling all the others, the small ones?" The Minotaur could not push him back with its attack, and all because he was pinned down. The weight of his own body firmly held him in place. He took off his cloak and grabbed the sword. Moreover, one of his friends once even scolded him for such an idea. She finally found something to say. It was the first time such an opportunity had arisen. What she heard embarrassed her. Bird smiled and said that he was stranger than she had imagined. In a dream, the protagonist smiled and asked him. She asked if all travelers were like that. Didn't she think so? She laughed and said that's how it is. And so, having defeated the Minotaur through joint efforts, they set out to repair from. Well, that conversation, which started by itself, did not last long. Bari caught the sound and immediately announced, "It is the bell of the time of fear and wish fulfillment, time to pack up the camp, the ring." The sound rolled from the valley, from the same place where the Minotaur had just appeared. She used auxiliary air magic, the one that allowed hearing sounds from a specific location. She noticed the monster flying overhead and loudly stopped it, calling it a stone gargoyle. Consider, after all, their bodies are made of hard stone. Physical force strikes against them are almost powerless. He plunged his sword into the ground and loudly declared that he would take the monster's attack on his sword, and she only had to lean against his back. They withstood this blow, and he, as if having made a decision, lunged with a two-handed sword. The blade cracked. If that blow had hit the body, there would be nothing to bury. The monster grabbed him by the back, and she raised the dagger but froze as soon as she heard a ringing sound. She sharply turned around. He turned around and decided only one single gargoyle was within their power. If another appeared, she would no longer have time to cast a spell. She loudly called him and warned, let him be careful. Careful, the monster, having gained mad speed, crashed into her. With the same mad speed, his blow threw her several meters to the side. To the side, MC began to worry because of. About this, he shouted loudly to her. He shouted sharply, rushed forward, and asked if she was okay. She did not answer. He tightly gripped the sword in his hand. With great difficulty, with one jerk, he pulls her inside. Pull him out from under the ground and carry him through the gargoyle. Move him a little to the side. He immediately turned around. His face twitched from tension as he thought about how to get Barry out of there as soon as possible. Maybe the escaped gargoyle can return. She called him and said that the wishing Furan. It rang again. There were many of them, to the right and left. On both sides, he realized this and said that she must. She needs to hide in the cave. He stood before her and blocked the way. She stood near the cave entrance and declared that they need to summon wind dance on his hands. Otherwise, it is impossible. She will have to keep casting spells so that it does not fail. He swallowed the tension through clenched teeth. Like a true tragedy, everything was unfolding right now. 2 days had already passed since the moment of the collapse. Yuika and the rest had been searching for the missing comrades all this time. They barely stood on their feet and there. Their anxiety was growing like smoke that would not retreat. The group was led by Nuku, the gift of recognition. Focused, with a tense face, he thought, recognition can find monsters by magical streams that stretch from them, as if leaving a trail in the air. But this gift was not suitable for finding lost friends. Behind, he suddenly felt icy energy and a mocking aura, which seemed to be squeezed by shadow with every moment. For 2 days they had not caught a single clue. The Black Princess and the respected Mazakin were already beginning to lose patience, and it was felt even in the pauses between steps. How could he explain that his gift itself does not search for people at the crossroads? He suggested going right, thinking, if this continues, exhaustion and hunger will kill them, and eventually they will be completely weakened. He sighed heavily and quietly said that they need to find the luggage as soon as possible. Ivka heard this and immediately asked if he was okay, poor fellow. There was nothing to worry about. If she really understood everything correctly, he denied everything and stated that even if they found the luggage, they could not get to the surface without Sherpa himself, of course. He hoped that he was alive and well. Mazi might have laughed and moreover, asked if they would push the girl in the same way. Against the background of Nuka, the tension stretched even more. After that, he objected again and said. He stated that he and Bari had fought side by side for so many years. Of course, he wanted her to be okay too. They moved forward and he stopped as if frozen and suddenly realized he had nothing more to say. He seemed to be struck by fear just as Litz touched his shoulder. He turned around and embarrassment did not leave his face. He was still trying to understand what exactly was wrong with this monster. Could it be that she really decided to cheer him up and called, asking why he was still stuck there? They were supposed to show him the way. He nodded and said that ahead were monsters, about 3 of them. Cerberus appeared. I wanted to warn them about this and... Iveka called the King of the Dead in a serious tone and gave an order. He made them attack and use Swamp of Duh to push them into the offensive. Then he wove a spell of darkness and apologized, and said that there is only one 3-headed Cerberus. She said that he usually does not make such a mistake. Come on. The smart ones patted him on the head and she, quite surprised, said it aloud. But he had no right to attack at all. What was he counting on? Mazuakin said that the monster simply decided to empathize. With their friend, she thought about it, apologized, and said that she had been too harsh with him. He said that he also admits his guilt. Nuku asked them not to worry. She shed a tear and decided, this monster understands all the subtleties of human relationships. She walked forward with a sad face and thought that they still had to go through that feeling of hopelessness. They managed to pass through so many labyrinths that she could no longer count, and had never before felt such a search that radiates so much doom. She and Bari had been friends for so many years. She was always nearby like a younger sister who does not leave the older one for a step. Of course, she wants everything to be fine with her. Like travelers, they had to be ready to lose each other at any moment. They met Darling about 2 weeks ago and became lovers only 10 days ago. Such a short time is not enough to settle into irreversible love and truly weave a person into your life. She had not yet managed to become attached to him and had not given him her heart, so everything would have been fine with him, even if he were no longer alive. Gone, Nuku called the Black Princess and said that there were plenty of monsters ahead. This already resembled a carnival. Too much. A barely noticeable surprise slipped into her voice. Eyes a carnival in this excerpt, she noticed it, was surprised and then a little embarrassed asked, look if they were really there. Nuku and Mazakin rushed forward. The heart was pounding and it seemed to her she was afraid to find out the truth. Perhaps the smell of a person attracted them all there. The corpses ran into the crowned lizard folk and that was their end. She froze with a wary look and pondered the coming. The adventure in Sherpa, which was left without a group, had no chance of survival. He asked the princess, cover yourself and cast the Moonblade spell. She cried immediately as soon as it dawned on her, and everything trembled in her head as soon as her beloved dies. She She wouldn't have endured this, no way. He warned the princess again that she should. She needs to go left and use the unstoppable soul killer spell she dashed aside and grabbed. She grabbed the sword and decided that she had. Stop thinking about his death, she rolled back. As she moved forward, it seemed to her that he was a true first-class Sherpa. So he definitely has to figure out how to do it, spoil it so it becomes stale. Alive, the horned monster with floppy ears blocked her way and immediately lunged with its tongue. Pausing for a moment, she activated the skill to accelerate sharply and clenched her teeth from tension. She decided that's exactly why the tears must stop. She wanted to believe that he was alive. She can strike the monster behind her with her magic. And she kept rushing forward using gift. Phantom Needle against the bighorn monster, He jumped to the ground and said his name, Nekusak. And that he has to fight the rest of the monsters. She kept running and thought that she really wanted to meet him again, saw MC standing near the cage. The cave he dug in a terrible state and that then sh. Froze in fear even before she managed to call him. Yuka looked at him and wondered what could be in this worthless sword. And it didn't even look like a sword, a leather cloak covered in soot and torn. It bore traces of fire, lightning, and ice. What kind of monsters did he face? An empty, invisible gaze. His clothes were soaked with blood and had already darkened to a deep crimson color. He was barely conscious. But he still stood. She began to cry and thought, they have known each other for a very short time, so she would. Would it be normal if she never saw him again? Complete nonsense. No matter how much time passed since their meeting, even those 10 days they spent as lovers. Members met unimaginably much. She went to him, called darling, and decided that her heart already belonged to him. She hugged him, called again, and said that it was her, the one he could no longer fight with. With incredible effort, he pronounced her name and said that Bari is in this cave. She has She has a fracture and exhausted magical powers. She needs urgent treatment. Mazagan rushed into the cave, called her, and said that there are no more monsters. They need to stop resorting to magic. She lay with her eyes closed and called him Dad. Nuku jumped out to them and he said that they need first aid. Eureka was confused, called Litz, and ordered them to guard the perimeter. Then he asked if there was anything to stop the bleeding. Ro closed his eyes and thought that everyone survived. They survived. She pressed the cloth to his face with tears and asked, let them treat the wounds and let them all return to the surface together. Okay, 2 days after Twilight Sword surfaced. Hospital for Heroes, located near the entrance to the labyrinth. He was confined to a small ward for especially important patients on the very top floor. He sighed heavily, twitched his face, and ran one thought through his mind, terribly grateful. But this luxury is a complete nightmare. There was a bathtub filled with undiluted magical elixirs, piles of hemostatic mixtures lay around, and elite-level healing magic as if they were preparing to resurrect the dead. Earlier, he had visited the doctor and said he was fully healthy now, so he wanted to be discharged. He adjusted his glasses, refused an additional examination, and then declared, Twilight's sword ordered him to get well. To avoid even a scratch, he mentally decided, if Yueka comes tomorrow, he will ask her for help. To ease the departure, he heard a knock on the door and involuntarily decided that it was. It was the doctor, the same one who had given her permission to enter. She opened the door. He approached Darling and said that she had come to visit him. May she come in? He called her and replied that there was no need to ask. He was surprised that she wore a snow-colored dress, and he noticed it immediately. She admitted that she usually does not wear such things. Bari chose it for dinner parties, but such places are not for her. Today she wore it for the first time. For the first time, how does he like it? He smiled and said, that you are irresistibly attractive. She was delighted to hear this. She sat down next to her and the protagonist confessed. During the last descent she hardly rested at all. Could she at least get some sleep when they return? She smiled and replied that she just laid down for a minute. And she woke up only after a day and a half. During lunch, she went to check on Bari. He, a little worried, said that it seemed she had been sent to a hospital specializing in fractures. How is she? Is she okay? Smiling, she assured that she was not worried at all, but Mazakun was too tense. She told her how he did not lose his composure and ordered to hide in that cave. She was incredibly grateful to him for saving her life. As she understood, she wanted to apologize for her behavior. Will he accept the apology? He agreed and she exhaled. And this even pleased her, but her thoughts again pulled her back to the very same. She turned away and whispered something barely audibly. And he noticed it and called her by name. She turned to him and he asked what was wrong with her. She was so overwhelmed with nervousness that she finally dared to ask, was she? She could climb in there and he never understood why exactly until the very end. But she agreed to it. After that she lay down next to him on the bed and covered herself. With a blanket, he looked at her and decided that it was. If it were really an expensive dress, it would definitely have wrinkled. Eureka shyly asked again, by the way, how did he feel? It seemed to him that she smelled of flowers. He also started to get nervous and said that in fact, he felt great, so he was ready to defeat even the Minotaur with his bare hands. So he decided to check out tomorrow and noticed how she lowered her head and called him by name. She said that she had just become an adventurer and for the first time felt fear on her own skin. After the collapse that separated them until the moment they met again, her heart was momentarily gripped by paralyzing horror. In her head, countless excuses for leaving them spun one after another. It hurt so much that she wanted to tear out her own heart just to finally feel the emptiness. But as soon as she saw that passage teems with monsters, a click immediately happened in her head. How exactly she would find their bodies. Her beloved believed in her and did not doubt for a second, but even she thought. She wondered what he would do when there was not a single living one left, and she herself the one who would have to believe in him stronger than anyone. She apologized and he decided, she is one of those who hold to principles and the law. The last, that is why she has such strong spirit pure like the night sky. He hugged her and said he does not recognize love that believes blindly. Her ability to act even when there is complete chaos in her head, and to turn any situation to her advantage so much that it seems like a miracle. Logic leads one way and the desires of the heart quite another. He believed in her and knows for sure she believed in him just the same. But despite everything, she is still incredibly good and he loves her just as she is. It moved her, she leaned forward. She stepped closer, whispered darling and kissed him. They continued kissing for a little while longer and he was trembling a little inside. He thought everything was already hopelessly ruined. He didn't understand at all how to relieve that tension, and he saw nothing. Any buttons or knots, maybe they were just hidden under. Under the ruffles, Yuika touched his lips and whispered what he had said. He replied, at moments like this it's normal to have to pretend to be. Like a mischievous kitten, Yuika began rubbing her head against his face, and he thought that she really was like a kitten. His face flushed red with shame. She said, darling, and immediately explained that this was exactly why she asked him to be gentle with her. She frowned and then immediately dived into a cat-like manner, moving, rubbing, and the same thoughts kept spinning in her head, what if? I thought maybe she should ask Thea about this. Once more precisely, the next morning they woke up in the same bed. And MC greeted her with good morning, smiling. This confused her so much that she responded the same way in tone and with the same expression. Then they walked down the street and she, blushing, whispered, was it perhaps not a pretense like a kitten? And indeed there was no need, so why didn't he tell her about it yesterday? At first he was a little embarrassed, apologized and said that she tried so hard. And it was extremely sweet. He hadn't finished speaking when she firmly squeezed his hand and looked displeased. He loudly declared that overall it was not like that. He said he couldn't take off her dress, so let there be a ticket. She was on the verge of tears from embarrassment, and responded just as loudly that his embarrassment was not even close to hers. He caught a threat in her gaze and mumbling embarrassedly stated that no one would be worse off because of this. When two share something shameful between themselves, their relationship only strengthens. She recovered a bit and said that now it was his turn to tell her something equally embarrassing about himself. Yevka was convinced. Her behavior yesterday could have no other interpretation: the dress she usually didn't wear, the perfume, and the fact that they slept in the same bed. They miraculously survived the first and second descents, however. There was no guarantee that their next third descent would go smoothly. She didn't want her feelings for her beloved person to be reduced to mere pity. Regrets when they were finally found, she sighed with relief, but as soon as she glanced she realized it was such an unbreakable adventure. The spirit of the traveler he hid within himself and fell in love again, as if for the first time. Darling has a family for whom he is ready to do anything, and she carries the duty to destroy dungeons. They cannot give up the most precious for love and still have not let go of that hand. Rose said, around the corner, the home of relatives who take care of Marie. Ivica was already about to say, say something at least. As soon as she saw her crying, she ran up and called her loudly. She called her sister and asked, is this the picture book you gave her? What happened? D to him, with a tearful expression on her face, she exclaimed and began to beg for forgiveness. She hugged her and whispered, no need to apologize, it's not her fault. Mitcha and Colin left the house and began to mock. They pounced on her, but as soon as they saw him, they immediately recoiled and ran straight back. She cast a glance at them, and her face froze with a very displeased expression. He asked, are those the two who did that? And Marie continued, crow. She started crying but still agreed and said that she just sat in the corner to read and then they took the book from her. Morale opened the door. So you chose to return, he asked, she asked. She stretched out her hand and waved it off, as if she had no idea why all this fuss had started. It's foolish to believe children's words. Who knows what really happened there? Maybe he was just about to quarrel with her. He took coins from the bag, denied everything, and stated that everyone saw how her children teased his crying sister. After that, he handed over the money and asked her to persuade them not to do it again. She just snorted and slammed the door right in front of his nose. She was dissatisfied and was about to ask something, but he immediately cut her off. They would talk about it as soon as they returned. He greeted Marie and, barely smiling, signaled that it was time for them to go home. Home, when they returned home, Yuika loudly called darling and said that it was not worth giving up so quickly. Why did he just let them go? He should have demanded compensation. Sensation, he asked her to calm down and said that the pages were dirty, then for now. He carefully wiped the cover and then took it to a specialist, let him glue it. She was happy and wiping tears from her eyes whispered, could this really help? Help, the protagonist agreed and promised, they will come for this tomorrow. She asked if he always calls those people to take care of her. He agreed and explained, Murao is my only relative. She asked if the money he paid would be enough for kindergarten, which undoubtedly would be better for her, right? Right, he said that unfortunately there was nothing like that in their city. He hugged his sister and said, children. Children without families either die of hunger or end up on the black market. He agreed, they know. They did not have the warmest relationship, but if something were to happen, at least she would be safe. Life, she agreed, scared and silently. She wanted to object but was overwhelmed by horror. The deeper the group descended, the deeper it pulled her down too. The greater the danger awaited Sherpa, the greater the risk his exposure faced. But the lives of Darling and Marie were in danger, and not from someone else but from her. MC touched her with a small smile and said she did not need to worry, he had already made his choice. He made this decision after careful risk assessment, and they pay him so much that probably nothing can go wrong. She said they are really close, not just as a traveler and a Sherpa. He did not even manage to finish, he refused and immediately declared that this was a matter only for his family. She was shocked that. She thought that she was pushed away or rather clearly made to understand her place, so that she would not take responsibility. He smiled and said that, to be honest, he plans to move to a big city so that Mari could go to school. So he will gradually save money, and if he contributes to this, he will receive the reward they give for the next descent. His disagreement, and he will get exactly as much as needed. Then she will finally be able to live without worries. Yuika said this, looking resolutely that money is the reason. Now she immediately noticed the expression on his face. Aggression and the thought that they will definitely meet. Meetings are not yet permission to shift everything you want onto someone else's shoulders. He does not need charity and he will not accept it. His quiet smile told her this without a single word. He chooses for himself what to do, and it seems he wears this principle like a motto on himself. He takes responsibility for his sister, so after this they will start a new life. But in the future that Darling so desires, she is not there. Last night they were burned by burning feelings. They clearly love each other, yet it still remains a matter of his family. So he does not consider her close, the one to whom family problems can be entrusted. The problem is that she loves him so much, but to him she is still a stranger. She stubbornly looks at him and thinks he will not live to see this. She began to take off her gloves and said that she believes the best intentions guide him, and these words struck her to the depths of her soul. Ro was confused and called her name, and she threw the gloves on the table and with great embarrassment loudly declared that so he must take her as his wife. Because of this he became even more confused, and she, with a determined expression on her face, she thought that this way the problems of her favorites would finally disappear. Already the next morning he was bound in the Sherpa Guild and did not understand what was happening there. The department employees tensed up, pressed the papers to themselves and declared, the report on the underground descent into the dungeon was delayed, it will not go until he writes it. He took on the task and wrote. Meanwhile, they fussed as if they were about to go dancing, and he apologized and promised that everything would be done by morning. Their sudden appearance was so unexpected that he didn't even have time to prepare breakfast for Mari. Gunji also tensed his muscles and loudly said that there was nothing to fear here, and then he drew a line in the air with his hand. He pointed to the side and ordered him to look here, Sherpas. He brought her a full basket of various dishes and invited her to eat. One of them exclaimed joyfully, here are candies and juice, take as much as you want. There are plenty here. He already brought his sister with him. So she really had been to the Sherpa Guild more than once and knew that these big men were actually kind. The guild leader also approached and slyly declared that they needed to stop and even promised to take care of her. Gima, with a look of dissatisfaction, cut in. They should calm down, otherwise they would actually lose control. Fighting, she asked the employee to close the door, called him closer and said, in these guides everything you need. Information about the labyrinths of the Tyro's dungeon. According to him, this data will fill all the gaps on the maps. He agreed to tell her everything that happened in the dungeon, right closer to noon, right in the very center of the city, in the temple of the goddess Galatica. Bari, with a joyful expression on her face, left the building in thought, finally leveled up, and also to get a new ability, probably need to check the report with the princess. She froze as soon as she saw the protagonist walking down the road. The road instinctively hid behind a flower bed. She looked back and decided, the man walking ahead is the head of the Advent Guild of Travelers, she was sure. His name is Joe, but who is this woman and why are they walking together with her? Her heart tightened with a bad feeling, so she decided to follow them. She set off after them and reached the building they had just entered. She used the gift Furan Consciousness and decided that it was here she received the invitation from the Tyro City Hall for dinner at a first-class restaurant. She attached a magical mark to his back. This gift allows hearing sounds within the radius of the same mark to which the gift's device is attached. She heard the restaurant worker say that they needed to go to the private room on the second floor. Their partner will be here very soon. After that, she heard a knock on the door and someone was hurriedly apologizing to Barramun for being late. She caught Jim saying, "Updating the map takes time." Bari decided that she was from the Sherpa Guild. It was the voice of a woman who had just passed by. The mayor announced what had already happened. They had broken the diving record again. She closed her eyes and thought that she needed to gather herself and listen to the conversation. The mayor added that they could sit down. There was enough food for everyone, so no one had anything to be ashamed of. He already knows about the Twilight Sword down to the details, right? Then he will be able to answer his question. She looked seriously. Why could such an important man secretly find out about their team? A bad feeling did not leave her. He said he wanted to learn about the gift of the Phantom Needle. How many creatures can this technique subdue? MC said he did not know the exact number, about 10, but he could be wrong. She smiled upon hearing this and decided that he had just lied, although in reality there were many more.